A little bit of adjustment here. Mr. Rob Knorr.
I'm on the Hickory Dickory podcast, and everyone has a better voice than me. You guys all have awesome voices.
Standing. And Mr. Dylan Burns.
I'm on the pseudo hippy dippy.
Oh, burn.
Ooh.
Mute. 10-minute mute.
Wow.
Panel mute.
He was here, and there it went, right? All right, let's try this one more time, Mr. Dylan Burns.
Apparently, I'm on this new up-and-coming thing called the Hickory Mickory Dickory or something.
The Hickory Dick.
Hickory Dick, yeah.
So already
Bring
from
in
the
the
start,
wood.
the audience should understand that since Dylan can't follow simple instructions, there's no way that his opinion on governmental structure should be taken seriously, right? Now, ooh, I know, right? When it fucking comes right back around.
I
Now,
don't respect your authority in these parts. Unconstitutional.
oh, Jesus. Now, thank you, everyone, right, for being here and being here on time, right? Very much looking forward to the discussion that I have planned out for us tonight. I invited each one of you because I feel like I know you pretty well. I feel like you're all very smart individuals and definitely understand the idea of what we're trying to do here, which is find solutions to some of these problems, right? Instead of just debate broing it out and just keep bringing up other shit that never actually solves the problem. The whole goal is to try to find solutions, right? Now, that being said, I'm going to read to not only you all, but also to the audience. All been anxiously waiting. The pack's been telling me all week how much they've been looking forward to more of a solutions-based panel than simple debate, bro. So this is exactly why I'm doing it. This is what they wanted, so this is what we're doing. Now, for accepting the invitation to the Hickory Dickory podcast, and welcome to the Infinity Acre Wood, where we host a solutions-based panel that will attempt to come to a conclusion on the given problems/topics that will be given. Your goal on this panel should be to take your time, consider the ideas of the other people, and bounce them off of the known frameworks of government of the United States with a clear goal for the future of the country. During your introduction, I'm asking that you let the people know who you are, how you feel about the United States Constitution specifically, separate and apart from the actual institutions of the government, those being the executive, legislative, and judicial. And if a convention of states were called, how would you want to frame the Constitution to make your ideal world? Hopefully, you've been doing some thinking about this one through the week, to where it's kind of like a short, simple answer. Maybe there's some changes, but specific to that, right? The first problem, though, once we get past the introductions, which we're going to allow a little more time than I would say normal, because I want to kind of understand the people who are talking a little bit more instead of it just being, nameless or just, faces on the internet, right? What makes these people tick, and why is it the CTV even bothered bringing them to the panel? I mean, once we get through that, the first problem topic that I would like to find a solution to is the following. Urban and rural areas of the country are growing increasingly distant from one another as far as political ideology is concerned. How can we bridge the gap and encourage these areas to come closer to a consensus on social and legal behavior? Okay, and then from there we'll go to the other ones when we get there, and then understand along the way I may have specific questions that I may direct towards an individual on the panel that should be explained to the room, the audience, and myself. During those times, each panelist is asked to be patient so clarification can be heard. If there is an explanation or an expansion of an idea by another panelist needed, the conversation may become directed for further clarification, again, with the idea of solutions to these problems issues. Beyond that, my goal is to remain quiet during the duration of the discussion. Understand this. Once we get past this, I want it to just be able to take off. So that the ideas can be expanded through genuine interaction. However, if I am attempting to moderate, everyone is asked to be respectful of the space and shut down. Are there any questions? Outstanding. So with that said, we are going to start at the top of the room here with Mr. Dylan Burns, because we're going to see if he, in fact, does know how to follow instructions.
Well, I respect government authority when it comes to mask mandates and other things of that sort, so of course I would. But when it comes to the Constitution, the main things that I think I would change is I think that I would enshrine it in the Constitution that every American above the age of 18, no matter their status, as long as they are a United States citizen, and enshrine that they have a right to vote. And make it as simple as possible that once you hit 18, your vote. You get these documents, here they are, they're from the government, here is your government ID card for voting, here is your everything, handled. It's mainstream, federalized, and streamlined. This makes it super simple, and I think it's also something we could agree on because, hey, voter ID, election security, we have a federal streamlined process. That's something that I think I would want to see enshrined. And I think it's valuing that everybody gets to participate in the system above the age of 18 is something that I think is super American, and it's just something I would love to see enshrined in our founding documents. When it comes to bridging the divide between urban and rural communities, which I believe was the question.
Are we doing all of it in one go?
Oh, or was it just
No.
the first? Just the first thing? No, okay.
Just the first thing. So right now, like
There you
maybe Dylan, expand on your background, which I know has a lot to do with foreign policy.
Oh.
Why people even bother listening to you, right?
Well, people listen to me because I'm pretty. Besides that, I was a foreign policy advisor to two congressional candidates. One, State Senator Jill Carter, who was running to replace Elijah Cummings, Michaela Wilkes. I'm currently a political consultant with 21st Century Democrats. I'm on the environmental board for the city of College Park. I also ran his campaign, Patrick Wolhan, who happens to be also the first gay mayor in our city's history. And we got some other stuff in the works right now that I can't announce, but I've also done some work in the Maryland General Assembly and also some stuff with 1199 SCIU when it comes to healthcare workers and their union. So yeah, there you go. That's why people listen to me, and I'm pretty. That one especially, emphasizing that.
Outstanding. Now, hey Scarlett, if you would please.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me on CTV. It's nice to see all you. It's nice to meet you. And hello, chat. If you've never seen me before, my name is Johnny, and we do a lot of stuff here on Twitch, man. But mainly today, we are doing politics. We are doing something that I think is foundational to how discourse in America should be, which is actually finding solutions. And I come from a rural community, an extremely out in the backwoods rural community originally, and I now live in a metropolitan area. So I'm excited to observe both sides of this and hopefully come up with some things that we can discuss further. So as far as the American Constitution, I did grow up a patriot. I do enjoy living in this country. However, I also realize that there are a lot of issues with some of the foundational practices that we have. For instance, within the Constitution, which I do believe is a living document, we have something called the 13th Amendment, which is a bit of a loophole for providing free, unadulterated, captured labor for the private prison system. And I think that that's something that needs to be addressed in order to not only allow people to not be involved in forced labor, but also to show and to bring new generations into patriotism so that they can see that we do live under a living document, and so that we can see that if we have problems with how we're being governed, we actually have the ability to change that. I think that that's something that would really, really give a lot of young people more hope in their country as it is today. And that's going to be my intro.
Outstanding. Brittany, if you would please.
Okay, so yeah, I'm Brittany. I host Politically Provoked, a debate show. And so this is new me going on the panels, but it's fun. All right, so my biggest, mine's going to be pretty short, actually, and everybody's probably going to hate my answer, like everybody on this one. But I would probably abolish the Second Amendment in my ideal world. So that's kind of the only real thing I could think of that I'd really specifically want to change about the Constitution. Next.
Tell us a little bit about you. Like, how did you come to? I mean, like, kind of how did you come to that question? Would probably be one that would be the most apt question. So,
How did I come to where I want to abolish the Second Amendment? Is that what you're asking?
well, yeah. I mean, that way people kind of understand, like,
Yeah.
how you understand things.
Yeah, no, I don't think the Second Amendment was properly interpreted by the Supreme Court. I think that that this whole idea that it's a right is kind of bull. I think that it should be a privilege. And I think it necessarily was a privilege. I think that we're interpreting it in a much different way than it was initially meant for. So that's
Well,
I'm very
I think
anti-guns.
I think that's very interesting. I'd like to invite you to the future Hickory Dickory panel that's going to be talking about guns, but it won't be this one. Okay.
All right.
Dr. Heenbout, how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing really good. This is opposite to my regular schedule, but I'm here for you, my friend, as a founder's badge holder in my chat. It was only right that I showed up to this Hickory Dickory podcast. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. So if you would, please take it away.
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Eamdout. I stream in the mornings here. You guys can catch me. I talk about politics. I debate with chatters, but also I make it fun, entertaining. We have game shows, all kinds of things. In terms of the Constitution question, I think there's something to be said about a piece of legislation or an article, governmental article, that has lasted this long, has yielded pretty good results throughout the years. Obviously some adjustments were required, but there's something to be said about it. In terms of what I would do if we could rewrite the Constitution today, as of with the current climate of things, there's a couple of things that I think are really, really important, and as far as I know, they aren't spoken about in the Constitution. I think that, like, any modern country, any developed country now should guarantee healthcare for its citizens. I don't think that this is a very difficult thing to accomplish. And as someone who works in healthcare, I know the astronomical costs associated with modern medicine and things like early diagnosis, how important they are in terms of long-term outcomes. So I think for sure healthcare should be guaranteed. And maybe in the same way how back then they weren't aware of, the nuances of medicine, maybe we could also rein in the guns a little bit. I don't think it was ever predicted the capability that guns have now, or drones, or all these different kinds of weapons. None of these things were predicted by the founding fathers when the Constitution was written. So I think if we were to rewrite it, I think these are two things that should be addressed. And lastly, I think most importantly, and I'm already prefacing my answer for the next question, a massive problem in America, I think, is public funding of education. The population of America, to me, just seems like they're not as critically thinking as the rest of the developed world is. Like, we can see that because, for example, in America, you have the higher rate of anti-vax and, like, full-on anti-vax people than you do in other developed nations. And I think that this has a lot to do with the divide between things like charter schools and public education.
Very well. The more perfect union, if you would, sir.
Everybody, thanks for letting me be on the panel. I am the more perfect union. I'm a former U.S. Navy submariner who knows how to get down and get back up again without blowing the main ballast tanks. I happen to be an original intent constitutionalist who believes the consensus which was arrived at by the founders was to provide a modest federal government with the largest group of powers, those which were called unenumerated, that they would be reserved to the states. I think the framers used precision in their words for a particular purpose, and that they understood the difference between provide or promote. These are distinctly different terms. And while the nation has had its challenges both internally and externally, the founding document saw the need to be adaptive without being fluid. Changes would inevitably be needed, and the process provided for in Article 5 details multiple ways of effecting these changes. It's been done 18 times since 1791. If we put aside our seemingly incessant desire to score political points, we can effectively decide how to keep this document current and relevant. I think the alternative, in my opinion, is to substitute easier methods, which will undercut the very legal foundation, which will put our judiciary at risk for being beholden to a political party at any given moment of time. So if we were trying to figure out how to, and you can tell me if I need to cut this short or whatever, but in order to figure out what we would want to do in a convention of states, we have to understand what the problems really are. So I think that we would get in a convention of states a widely diverging group of asks, as this would represent really the first time in 230 plus years that the people or the states would be able to have an impact on what the federal government was supposed to look like. Before we get to what the outputs or the outcomes of that would be, we have to discuss what the problems are, what the inputs are. And as the saying goes, garbage in, garbage out. A wise Congress would allow state legislatures to define their representation and issues of import to those states, while a wise state legislature would be advised not to push radical agendas that might appeal to their fringes, rather appeal more to the center of their constituency. Remember, the goal of a convention is to arrive and approve one or more amendments which would be capable of achieving a 3/4 majority. Failure to do this would just mean the entire effort was wasted. And the further away we get from this ideal, the less likely a convention would return any viable proposals at all. So assuming that reasonable heads prevailed, the largest problem that I see with the current system is the turn towards a centralized federal government. The founders believed that things such as post roads and common defense should be provided for by the central government. They also believed it was necessary and proper for the federal government to regulate interstate commerce to prevent tariffs between several states as a means to encourage trade, commerce, and the coming industrial revolution. The judicial decision Marbury versus Madison, the Supreme Court did something theretofore unprecedented. They made themselves the arbiter of what the Constitution meant. Prior to this ruling, cases which came before it were judged on how the underlying laws fit the Constitution. If the law didn't comport with the written word, the case was unconstitutional. Post-Marbury, courts were deemed to own the ability to state what the intentions of said laws were. As we begin to see case law and precedent begin to form around the ideals of the justices themselves rather than the constitutionally, incrementally government became able to intrude itself more and more into the lives of the everyday common man. And while the Civil War saw a change in this behavior away from federalism to a more centrally managed federal government, with states beginning to lose their sovereignty at a bigger clip, the Reconstruction efforts limited state control of their own affairs. States pushed back in ways that we have seen had decades-long adverse effects. They led to racial strife and animosity, and even so, prior to 1913.
And how does all this? I'm with you, MPU. Right? Very, very good history lesson. Specifically, right?
Okay, so
if we could get this
problems, right, the primary problems, right? The Federal Reserve, okay, gave the government the ability to sort of balance out what the currency was going to look like. Then we had the 16th and 17th Amendment, which gave us the direct taxation of income for the first time. And the way that that tax was done was through a progressive tax, which basically skewed the payment of the nation's affairs heavily towards one group of economically advantaged people. Okay, and the old adage that if you don't tax me, don't tax thee, tax the man behind the tree. This is the living embodiment, okay, for a disproportionate tax system. So as politicians, well, and then the 17th Amendment, right, which is how the state legislatures lost their ability to appoint or elect their own senators. And by doing this, they went to a direct election system. It then made it more likely that political parties would see an exacerbated control over what was going on. And of course, politicians are interested in having their own power. So they tended to promise a lot of things, create programs. And with the 16th Amendment funding those programs, it became much easier to have a different kind of corruption become more widespread. So if we want to talk about those things, if you believe that those things are the primary drivers for why the nation is in the state of affairs that it is in, the loss of state sovereignty, the untoward influence that the federal government has over the lives of individual people, then you have to reform or repeal the 16th Amendment. And I'm going to say you don't necessarily have to say you don't want to have a tax system, but make it not progressive. and isolate or give people the ability to live and survive, right? Make that tax free. Get rid of the rest of the deductions, the loopholes, and everything else. Okay, so
for everybody that's watching, right? So the important things to take away from MPU, right, is one, he is a fellow submariner like myself, right, who definitely knows what he's talking about and is very eloquently spoken about it, right? That said, you can find him at The More Perfect Union on Twitch. And that way we can get over to our good friend Aircraft Sparky, right?
Yeah,
Aircraft Sparky. If you would, kind of introduce yourself and your framework for the Constitution, your thoughts on it, and take us away from there.
Hi, welcome everybody. It's your boy Aircraft Sparky here, new to Twitch.tv. Thank you for having me, CTV. So when it comes down to the Constitution, look, it is written, it has been approved by the states, it has been ratified, and it needs to actually be followed. One of the problems with the Constitution today is the fact that it is not followed. States' rights do not exist as far as pretty much everyone is concerned for some reason. And when it comes down to it, look, you can't have the first without the second. I'm big on free speech. I'm big on the Second Amendment, and I'm also big on government staying in their frickin' lane. When it comes down to it, the articles in the Constitution actually spell out what the obligations are for the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. We have a way overbloated government that really is taking over for the states. Is this because the states weren't actually holding up, or was it that the oligarchs just didn't have enough of a grasp? That's really my question when it comes down to the Constitution. I believe in following the intent of the Constitution as it was initially written. Admittedly, there are some things that was unjust when it was written, and a lot of people will say, "Oh, the 3/5 compromise." You are right; that was disgusting. Well, we corrected that. You could say the 13th is bad. Yeah, to a point it is, but I think one of the biggest, most egregious things is the fact that the 10th Amendment is never followed and the 17th Amendment exists. So beyond that, look, it's very simple. If we want to do a convention of the states in order to ratify, to change the Constitution, we need to actually point out the true problems. A gun has never killed anybody by itself. I have never seen a gun hunt without a person attached to it. I have never seen speech hurt or kill anybody.
Okay, so Sparky, who are you?
Oh, I am Aircraft Sparky. I'm a U.S. combat vet. I am a teacher of history and also now a teacher of technical things such as jet engine repair. People come to me because, well, I am the common man. I am not I'm not some foreign policy scholar. I am someone who has been the forefront of foreign policy enforcement. I have been sent downrange in order to enforce the ideals of what the oligarchs have decided that we need to do. And, well, I'm not happy about that. So when it comes to the foreign policy think tanks, you got to leave the country and actually experience the world to actually be in foreign policy. So, yeah, I think a lot of people aren't qualified for those positions. Just my opinion. Nothing against them.
And somebody in my chat is asking, what does your shirt say?
It says, "This is my killing shirt," because I plan on killing it tonight.
Why is he singling me out? What did I do?
Look, it's all about the love, right?
So cute. So cute. I love it. Sprouticus, right? Let me kind of circle it back around here, right? I'm asking you to let people know who you are, how you feel about the United States Constitution specifically, right? So, who are you? And then we get on the Constitution. Okay, let's go.
My name is The Sprouticus. You can find me at The Sprouticus on Twitch and Twitter. The Constitution, in my belief, it should be followed, and if there needs to be adjustments, then there's ways that the Constitution allows us to adjust the Constitution. If we were going to go down one of those paths, which is also in the question of calling the Convention of the States to adjust the Constitution, I would want the Second Amendment reworded to allow to basically state that it is an individual right, and even when people believe it's not, that it doesn't apply to certain weapons over other certain weapons, even though people tend to believe that. I just want the Second Amendment clarified, and that's where I'm at.
So we agree it's not clear, the Second Amendment, though.
Oh, goodness. Oh goodness.
I mean, it's pretty
Oh
clear, but
goodness.
we really
Oh
need to dumb it
goodness.
down.
Oh
Just say it.
goodness.
You know,
My
Sorry,
Sorry, carry on.
goodness.
Next person.
Hey, do y'all hear it? I can sing. I can sing. I can sing. I'll start singing Amazing Grace. I'll do it. I'll
Good,
do
I'll
it.
join you.
Right. Oh, it'll be so nice, won't it? It'll be so nice. All right, so Sprouticus, right? You can find him over at the Sprouticus. He runs the American Octagon and is a bright young mind that holds to conservative values. So Sprouticus, happy to have you here tonight, and of course, Mr. Rob Nord, the bear himself, right? How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. I spent the last 2 days with my son, who's 5 months old, so I'm as happy as could be. My name's Rob Noor. You can find me on Rob Noor, like it's spelled on the screen there, at Twitch. I am a conservative populist. Some things about me: my job is I do home health care with people with developmental disabilities. I've been doing that for about 12 years. I've lived in rural Pennsylvania my whole life. Like Johnny was saying, I'm actually lucky that all of the people I grew up with, most of them are conservative, but I was also a policy debater where almost everyone's left wing. So I have friends from both of those worlds. And I think that that's a reason to watch me, because I think I have a perspective on issues from both sides of people. I ran for Congress. I did not win, as you might have guessed. I don't know if I'd be on this panel tonight if I won. I don't know. I might be busy. Maybe not, though. It seems like these days Congress people have more free time than the rest of us. So I don't know.
Don't it?
So, but yeah, I stream almost every weeknight between 8 and 10 p.m. Eastern time. So, yeah, come check me out if you want. I like doing debates. I like talking to people from my audience. As far as the Constitution of this country is the greatest foundational document that was ever written for a country. The reason that it was great was because it prefaced the importance of the individual. Most countries at that point preface things like an oligarchy, a religion, a monarchy, things like that, a ruling class. The U.S. Constitution recognized that if we maximize people's freedom, liberty, and responsibility, we will have the best country in the world. And it certainly achieved that. Certainly, there are problems in the way that the foundational principles were interpreted, and those things are worthy of talking about. But the ideas outlined within the Declaration of Independence and within the Bill of Rights are the best principles that have been outlined for a foundational document. And we should all be proud to exist in a country that allowed us to get as far as we can because of the foresight of our founding fathers. There are plenty of specific issues that I could talk about that I would like to see passed. I'll only mention one briefly and then a couple of process things if there was a convention of states. The brief thing is, I think we should get back to what the Constitution says, that only the federal government has the right to print and coin money. The Federal Reserve is not part of the federal government. Therefore, they should not be printing and coining money, period. A couple process things. One thing I'm kicking around, I don't know how, I haven't thought this through very much, but I think that we should, if we had a convention of states, make it mandatory that we have a convention of states every 20 years to ensure that there's not like this unchecked government tyranny and that the states continue to have a voice. Because as it is right now, with the way our two-party system's set up and the amount of money and prestige and connections you need to get involved in the federal government, it's escaped the will of the people. And now through incompetence or corruption, it seems like we don't really have a voice. So by having every 20 years, a convention of the states, that could be some possible check on that. And one other thing that I've kicked around that maybe this won't be controversial, you hear a lot of, process changes being suggested, ending the filibuster or the nuclear option and things like that. I think that if we had a convention of the states, perhaps we should outline anytime there's a process change like that, it does not take effect until 4 years from that point. That way you can't see one party get into power, have a process change like that, and then ensure that the next election, that process change helps them. And this way, I think people would be more reserved and wouldn't make these extreme changes because they could say, oh, if we make these extreme changes, it could come back to bite us when it finally comes into effect in 4 years. As far as the specifics, the Second Amendment, stuff like that, yeah, we should use the amendment process more. If people have problems with the way some of those amendments are written, there's already a process to change that, and that is to have another amendment. It's certainly been done in the past. Yeah, I think a convention of states and having a mandatory convention of states would make it more likely that people use the amendment process instead of having the Supreme Court or executive abuse their powers and interpret things in the Constitution that aren't really there. That's it.
Well, I think every 20 years, just to kind of caveat off with that, because the entire idea of this introduction section is, for one, people to get to know you, two, for you to be able to expand on the idea specific to a topic separate and apart from, what we're actually going to be talking about freeform, right? I think 20 years would be a bit too soon. That'd be 5 times a century. seems like if you just kind of use some of like the more events that's happened in our history, right? Like it was what roughly 180 years from the time that we ratified the Constitution to the Civil War, right? And then like from there to like the next major changes that came were in the front end of the 20th century. So maybe every 50 years would probably be
Maybe.
somewhere about, because at least in that way, you know, you've got time instead of people you thinking that, oh, well, we'll just make this radical change at the next convention of states, because at that point, once it gets called, pretty much everything's up on the table. So at least they have to live with the results of their, unless they, because obviously they could call another one. You know what I mean? But if
Those state elections would be lit though on that year, wouldn't they?
Right?
Can you imagine how intense they would get?
People would have to be paying attention to the state legislature for sure.
Yep.
All right. So from here, right, the entire idea for this introduction section, and I'm very thankful that all of you showed up on time so that we could get through this. The first half an hour was committed to this. We're actually perfectly on time, right? As a matter of fact, my blood pressure alarm is going off, but I already took my medicine, right? So I know we're on time, right? I know, right? So that being said, now we're going to get into the discussion of what we mentioned to begin with, right? First problem topic that I would like to find a solution to is the following. Urban and rural areas of the country are growing increasingly distant from one another as far as political ideology is concerned. How can we bridge the gap and encourage these areas to come closer to a consensus, social and legal behavior? This time we're going to start at the bottom end of the room with Rob, and we're going to go up to MPU, Dr. Heemdout, and around. That way I don't have to say anything and the mic can just pass natural. Take it away.
Okay. Yeah, I think that this is a good question, and it's something I talk about in my show a lot. I say that the problem in this country is that we have a corrupt government, a corrupt establishment, and that corruption means that the voices that us people have don't really matter. The truth of the matter is, regardless if you're from an urban area, rural area, if you're on the left or you're on the right, most people are good people, and they want the best for the country. They might just disagree how to get there. Are we going to have a more socialist way, a more capitalist way, etc.? And so the more we could maximize talking about the things that bring us together and the solutions that are the society that we would like to see, the better chance we have of respecting each other's opinions and coming together. One of the things we could do is highlight the corruption of our institutions that we see and how they're detrimental to both people in or urban and rural areas. For example, hyper focus on divisive things like cultural Marxism and race is exactly what these people in positions of leadership want. They want this because it allows them to piggyback off that and pretend that they care about things. So as long as they say Black Lives Matter, they'll continue to screw over inner cities, and they'll put the blame on people that aren't powerful, such as, you know, people that live in rural areas and things like that. And it causes this never-ending fight and this perceived gap, when in reality, people that live in urban areas and people that live in rural areas have far more in common than any of the people that are in positions of power of our establishment. So if we could highlight that corruption and bring people to account that are involved in this corruption, and if we could take away the narrative control from places like the mainstream propagandist or the mainstream media, these establishment politicians, the people in academia that have this kind of agenda to be able to separate us, the people in the entertainment industry, and if we could maximize the voices online, particularly of average people, I think that you would start to see this division begin to be eroded. But I'm not, someone that's going to sit here and tell you that it's going to be easy. It's probably going to take years to bring us together, because there is a concerted effort by the people in charge of this country to divide us, and it's working. So it's going to be an uphill battle to fight against it.
So with that being said, I think that one of the things we can do to gap these areas, considering that the typically urban environments are more left and rural environments are more right. I think that there's something that we can definitely do to bring us together, and what that is stop making each other the enemy. And just because you're left, it doesn't mean that everyone on the right is your enemy and is out for you. Just because you're on the right doesn't mean everyone on the left is your enemy and is out for you. And the continuing of doing that is bringing the downfall of the political spectrum and being able to have conversations like we're having today. It's hard to have these conversations out in the street because people are so politically divided that they think that you are their enemy just because you have different political opinions than you do. And I'll bring this up. I never want another 9/11, but I would love another 9/12 because 9/12 the Democrats and Republicans had a common enemy. And so they put their grievances with each other behind them, and they work towards the common goal. So maybe we could find a common goal for the left and the right to work towards. That maybe not even a common enemy, just a common goal. I think that would help bring urban and rural environments closer together.
Sparky?
My turn, right?
Alrighty. Sorry about that.
Was it?
So look, the problem that has existed amongst the rural and the urban communities has always been the fact that, well, look, the urban for the most part hasn't really recognized the fact that it is the rural that actually helps them survive. Now this wasn't as bad prior to the passage of the NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which actually removed manufacturing from the states. So what really needs to happen is the fact that we need to get American manufacturing again. The way you bring these two polar opposite communities, if you will, together is through economic means. So what I would suggest is end all foreign manufacturing with American companies, bring American companies back. We do this through tariffs. We tariff the hell out of all their products. And this will actually force the elitist in the cities that actually produce absolutely nothing. They are basically a consumer base, strictly. It'll force them to actually learn how the sausage is made, because now they will actually see some of that. And it'll bridge that gap a little bit, because look, when people are producing together, they tend to work together. When they're working together to strive economically, this is where we will actually see some progress. Yes, this would take probably about a generation for this to happen, and it will never be bridged perfectly. It truly won't. But with today's technology, communication can increase, and these gaps can be bridged easier through economic means, rather than basic social means. That's just my opinion. You know, we need to get rid of ideas like NAFTA. We need to push things more like the USMCA, which was passed, and we actually need to push Made in America more than made by slaves overseas. Yeah, that's about it.
MPU?
You know, as I looked at the topic, right, I figured, well, is there a simple answer to this, or is it much more nuanced? And I started doing some research, and I came across a paper where this group of researchers, they took a look at historical patterns, voting patterns, and population patterns, and they equated that to population densities. And they took their study and they accounted for a variety of things: race, income.
This panel's going to be a fucking mess.
What they found was that the closer you were to a large urban center, the more likely you were to vote Democratic. And that the more you tended to live out in rural areas, the more likely you were to be conservative. And it didn't matter race. It didn't matter finance. It didn't matter anything, virtually any other thing. They accounted for in their methodology. They accounted for all of these different things. And what they found is that the more likely you were to want to be close to other people, the more likely you were to vote for policies that tended to reinforce that collectivism. Okay. And they found, and the study found, it's really, really weird, right? If you lived in rural areas, you were -11 or -12 to vote for Democrats. And if you lived in the cities, you were +11 or +12, right? It's not like a 21, 22 point swing. And if you look at like the election maps, right? Even just go back and look from 2000 forward, you see that the vast majority of the country is red in the election map, right? And then you have these very high concentrations of Democratic pockets in the large urban centers. So one of the other things they found in the study, that it was going to be less likely that people would change because the preference, the primary driver was their desire to be in the rural area or in the city. And there was very little that you could do to change that. So I don't think that it's an easy thing to try to resolve, because the needs of those different population groups, okay, sort of lend themselves more likely to one political ideology or the other one. So to be honest, I don't know. And the authors, in their conclusion, they found that it was very difficult to impossible to figure out how you could bridge that kind of a gap, because it's literally two different psyches that are involved. And again, just to reiterate, the interesting thing about it was that it was not race, it was not age dependent, it was not wealth dependent. It literally was geographic proximity. And we can get into that more later, but I mean that's essentially the take that I pulled away from.
I want to apologize, MP. The last probably just about 20 seconds, everybody didn't get a chance to hear. So I apologize for that, but we're going to kick it. We're going to go ahead and move on from there.
Yeah, we can do open on it. That's fine.
Yeah. So Dr. Heemdout, if you would, sir, take it away.
Okay. So I think a big problem with the divide. Well, first of all, if you look at the election map, even in the states that the Democrats won, if you look at it by city breakdown, the urban cities voted for Democrats and the rural areas voted for Republicans, and the same applies in California or anywhere. So that's interesting, and I think that's something that definitely should be looked at. I think a big part of this divide is because of the politicians, and more so than anything, people like Mitch McConnell and other Republicans who just refuse to play at all. They will literally have been open about the fact that they're going to do everything they can to block legislation. This kind of sets a bad precedent as like, oh, the people that are in charge right now are your complete enemy, and that everything they want to do is against your best interest. I think this kind of behavior is very toxic going forward for the health of the country. And then in order to fix these things, there's a couple of things. First of all, you can work on common goals. So for example, Joe Biden's infrastructure plan or healthcare policies, these are kind of things that affect everybody, and that everybody should be able to embrace these things. I don't think that you need to be a Democrat to embrace having better roads or better healthcare. And so that's one thing. Second of all, again, going back to it, public education, I think, is massively important. A lot of these things can be easily thought about. Like, if you have a little bit of critical thinking skills, you can kind of figure these things out, whether or not a politician has your best interests at heart, or whether or not you're being represented correctly. And so I think public education here has been a massive letdown. Lastly, a big part of the divide is like let's say people in the rural areas might be afraid of black people or LGBTQ people. The biggest reason that people are afraid of other people is just because of exposure. I could understand if someone lives in a rural area where they only live around cis white people, that they might be afraid of LGBTQ people because they've never met them, and so all of a sudden they think that the legislation that affects LGBTQ people is going to have a massive effect on their life. So I think that. And then lastly, one last thing, abolish the suburbs is a massive part of it as well. I think the suburbs are a horrible fucking thing that existed, and the more we live in mixed spaces, the better off we can be. Oh, sorry, one last thing. Aircraft, Sparky said that NAFTA caused manufacturing jobs to leave America and whatnot, and that he wants manufacturing jobs back. I just don't think there's any situation where manufacturing jobs are going to come back. Even if you legislate to bring them back to America, they're just going to instantly be replaced by automation, which is cheaper than hiring workers.
Brittany, if you would please.
All right. So, one thing. So, I'm a big Pete Buttigieg fan. So, one thing that he had suggested, and I thought was interesting, was when we used to have the draft, that people from all ends of the spectrum were going in service together. So they were all interacting a lot more with each other. He suggested something like maybe not a mandatory, but more of a social norm of a year of like some kind of public service. Maybe that's how you get rid of college, but then you have different walks of life all interacting with each other. I also think our social media and cable news is a huge reason these divides are just getting so extreme. One thing I would want to bring back the Fairness Doctrine and Equal Times Act, a modern version of that. I think that would be really helpful. I would invest a lot more into some of these low-income areas because I think education is a huge problem and leading to this. But I think that's kind of it for now.
Outstanding. Johnny Scarlett.
Okay. I have a few different points. Bear with me real quick. I think, first of all, one of the major problems with our two-party system is that we have too many pots on the same stove. We have too many ideologies being attached to the two sides of our supposed political system. And so if someone says that, for instance, they want to have a more populist view, if they want to have a more isolationist view, that should not necessarily be intrinsically tied to be able to describe every other aspect of your political personality. I think that's something that we've developed in the United States that's really harmful. Now, when we look for things that bring us to a better place, we're not looking for opinions. We're not looking on somebody's particular idea that's just their opinion of how the country can do better. What we really want is an objective. We want to be educated and to be objectively sure of what is going to bring even certain parts of the country into a better place, if not every part of the country. And that comes into different states having the rights to do different things with their economy, etc. Now, we really need to observe the information systems that are leading to these hyper isolated areas in the South. Now, I'm going to say there are some aspects of really metropolitan areas that are really harmful. I'm not the biggest expert on that. So what I'll mainly be speaking on right now is the South and rural areas of the South. We have no funding. We have no funding for technology. We have no funding to expand fast internet. We have no funding to put vast computers and coding classes in rural schools. I grew up very, very recently, y'all. I'm pretty young. I'm only 26. I graduated in 2012, and my computer class was a typing class. I didn't know what coding was properly until I was probably 23. Because we don't have the funding for those types of information technologies to be actually propagated throughout the South. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're not being federally funded, unfortunately. So I'm one of those people who says $15 minimum wage isn't for every state, but federal funding for coding classes in every classroom ought to be federal. That ought to be something that's just a baseline. Everybody learns about it. I also want to speak about how we frame philosophy in education, or really the philosophy of education. Right now, we are teaching rural kids that the best way to make their lives better is to get out. And we're letting people like millionaires, we're letting Bill Gates buy up 64,000 acres of land in Louisiana, rural acres of land that could be going to the Louisiana public park system or the forestry industry to specifically fund Louisiana, but instead it's going into Bill Gates' pockets. So we need to philosophically change how we teach these rural kids, and we need to say the best way to grow up and to be a well-realized person is not to escape, which is admittedly what I did. I used education and my free ride to college to escape the second I got the chance. And realistically, what I want to do is I want to become a more educated, well-established person so that I can go back and so that I can keep people like Bill Gates from taking over the small towns that I lived in, so that I can get that public funding into those small towns and help kids who grow up there to grow up like they have a future and like they have the ability to grow up and actually change some of these situations that they see their parents being stuck in. I think it's very unfortunate that we see ourselves as so different in the South from other people. And part of that is because we do like subsistence hunting. If you didn't grow up having to hunt in order to have meat through the winter like we did, you don't see yourself as Southern or rural or a hunter generally the way we see ourselves, the way that's so intrinsically part of our identity. And so growing up as like subsistence hunters, we we don't see the rest of the United States as having our best interests at heart, because if it did, we would probably be able to just have meat through the winter and not have to hunt for it. So that's the sort of issue that we really are dealing with. It really is, in some places, like really rural third level countries, growing up with cities surrounding it 3 hours out, and like growing up to realize, like, hey, we never had a chance. And unless we move to that city, we're never going to have a chance. So teach kids that they can change the situation they're in right now, give funding to rural communities, and have an idea behind everything that you do, that every single area of this country has its own struggles. Teach that to every single kid. Teach all of those struggles. Teach about the miners rising up in the 1920s and 30s in West Virginia in order to like protect their mining towns from corporatism. Teach that sort of thing in Louisiana. Teach that sort of thing in California. And teach about every single uprising and every single ability to be better that every part of this country has gone through in very different ways. Yeah. We're a patchwork, and we ought to be treating ourselves like a patchwork and not like a big ass melting pot, like we like to say, unfortunately.
Well, that's interesting. Mr. Dylan Burns.
Okay, so man, that was a lot. I think the main thing for me is a lack of shared reality. I feel like a lot of people, it would be easier to talk to others if you felt like you were working off the same facts and figures and data and information. If we all agreed about the certain historical events and certain backgrounds of like, well, this is what this means in the Constitution, or this is what this historical event meant for the United States, or this is what happened at this date, I think it would be a lot easier to communicate, because it's a lot easier to throw like names or go at people when you think that you're in the right, but you are working off of incomplete information. A great example for me is I was present at the January 6th riots, insurrection, big block party, whatever the hell you want to call it, shindig, yeehaw, hoedown, whatever. And a lot of people, and I made the stupid decision to go there in a Biden hoodie, and a lot of people were walking up to me and saying, "You're a traitor. You are a traitor to the United States of America. You are this, you are that," and all this stuff. And the stuff I saw go down there, and I'm thinking like to myself, if they were working off the same information I am, there's no way they would be throwing such accusations at me. There's no way someone would call me a traitor just for voting differently unless we were working in two completely separate realities. There's no way that could, I mean, there's no way that you could just throw that type of language at somebody without living in a different reality. A different reality of what happened during Reconstruction and the failure of Reconstruction. A different reality of what happened during the Civil Rights Movement, of what happened on January 6th. A different reality of what happened during the 2020 election when it comes to election fraud. A different reality when it comes to different politicians' records. A different reality on what happens with COVID and science. When reality is so consistently up for debate and so easily like twisted, with the modern media landscape, it's dangerous and it's scary, because then you can have two people who maybe in a different world would be actually agreeing on almost everything, or just being like, well, we just have different policy positions on how to get to that different world. If you live in two separate worlds, two separate realities, it's going to be impossible to find that common ground. It's going to be impossible to find that common place. The thing that I think of is Representative Matt Gaetz, right after the January 6th event, we can call it the incident, the oopsie doopsie on democracy's face. He immediately went up there and said that it was Antifa. Antifa actually infiltrated, and I have the sources to prove it. Of course, later it would find out that those sources were not as credible as first thought, and that they were actually facial recognition software from Antifa websites that Antifa posted like white nationalists on the website to show that these are white nationalists you should be aware of. But they thought, since the facial recognition software picked up people on Antifa websites, that was Antifa people in the crowd. it's easy for you to, if you believe Antifa did that, it's easy for you to have a completely different timeline of events for what led up to January 6th, what happened on January 6th. And I think finding a common reality is extremely important. On other things, when I hear the term cultural Marxism, all I can think is the term cultural Bolshevism, which was a term that was extremely scary in its use when it comes to the 1930s, and it feels like it really is the echoes of that term. And definitely in its development in right-wing circles in the early 1990s, it seemed to be running on that line. When it comes to the idea of we need to stop focusing on race, ignoring issues doesn't solve them. If we went to the people of Lebanon and said, well, I understand that your economy's in crisis. I understand that Hezbollah has all this power. I understand that you can't even withdraw more than $200 from the bank during a month. But if we just ignore it, then we'll have a little less divisive politics. If we just ignore all these issues that are deeply seated in the history of racism in this country, then maybe it'll go away. There is no time in American history where that has ever been the case when it came to the issue of race. There is no country in the world where that has ever been the case of the issue of race, the economy, civil rights, or anything. So I don't know how that would work today. When it comes to that study that was brought up about rural communities, it is true that you can actually, it is statistically significant when it comes to comparing urban communities and rural communities. I know the study you're talking about, but the conclusion wasn't that like race doesn't have an effect, these things don't have an effect, is that proximity when it comes to your geographic location also has a statistically significant effect on voting patterns. Race, income, gender still had significant effects. It did. I can read it to you right now. The study that actually I'll read it right now. Even after controlling for democratic, social, and economic factors, including geographic region, education, and income, age, race, and religious affiliation, and a spatial regression, we find that a county's position in the urban-rural continuum remains statistically significant in the estimation of voting patterns in presidential election. It is not saying that race and income, none of these things matter. It is just geography. If that was the case, it's weird that black people in rural communities still seem to vote more across Democratic Party lines than white communities rural. And that shows just right there that it isn't just geography that affects voting patterns. Besides that, when it comes to the idea of ending all foreign manufacturing, the prices of products would skyrocket. This is what the North Korean economy has sustained itself on for a very long time. In Juche thought, it is a failure for a reason. It does not make sense for one country to think it can be the one that produces all the goods in the world. While a lot of people, there are problems that come with globalism when it comes to loss of jobs, there are also massive economic gains when it comes to a drop in the price of products and when it comes to the dinner table. If it costs less for you to buy a car, if it costs less to buy products, that means more money on the table of American consumers and American families at the end of the day to pay taxes or to pay bills or to support their children through college. Past the TPP, I think that would be something that would help American prosperity. I would also like to say that foreign trade is extremely important from an international liberalist framework in international relations when it comes to keeping peace between states. There's a bunch of other stuff that I did write down as well, but I don't want to drag on too long. I don't want to filibuster, which we should abolish. So I'll let that go down.
Outstanding. All right, so we're still perfectly on time, right? This is a different format. This is now where we're getting ready to enter the discussion part of this. Right now, during this time, I want to make a couple of things clear. The only thing that I do not want to hear at all are any TOS words for obvious reasons, right? We got streamers here. Let's not do that. And I just personally do not like having the Lord's name taken in vain. So it's not going to be doing that. From there,
what was that?
What does that actually mean? Take the Lord's name in vain? I'm not religious. I don't know.
Say JC is an insult.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Really?
Or GD.
Or GD.
Yeah, GD.
GD.
GD's the big one, right? That's the big one, right?
Yeah, proper Billy Graham.
Got it.
Yeah. So that's the big one. I just don't like it personally. I tolerate it in other places because I don't get to make the rules here, which is perfectly fine. But I get to make the rules here, so I just don't want to hear it. Now, as we go into this discussion, the reason why we've been in this room together for this amount of time, with everybody having their own specific a lot of times to speak, is so that you now all should know that I am very patient and willing to listen to each and every single one of you. And I'm hoping that by me displaying that it makes you patient listening to other people. At this same time, though, right, we're not going to have big, long speeches during the discussion, right? Because the goal here is to be able to find solutions. That said, right, Dylan, heads or tails?
I do like me some tail, so we'll go that way.
All right, well, here we go. We're going to flip the coin. Tails it is. Now, you can go first or you can make Rob go first. What's it going to be?
I mean, I just went, so I think it's fair that they go first.
10-4. Rob, take it away.
All right. So there's some things to respond to. I guess trying to keep it short. I'll just respond to something Dylan said because I think that was. I do think that the biggest problem in this country is that we have people in control of institutions that don't really care about the average people, and in general, most average people want the same things. They just disagree on how to get there. So what we see people in positions of cultural power or political power doing is what's driving the wedge as far as I'm concerned. One of those things is seeking to divide us in as many ways as possible so that they could get away with the fact that they haven't worked for us. One of the easiest ways to do that is race. Dylan, I'm not surprised, is for that. For example, he tweeted out about Tucker Carlson being a white supremacist or something just today. Does that sound like the type of person that's bringing you together, that's trying to? The reality is he talks specifically about some things that are worth mentioning. He talks about January 6th and not agreeing on it. Well, where did this start? We saw an unprecedented amount of division and lies, not just from random people, not just from random streamers, but by, quote, official sources when it came to the Trump election. We saw riots that occurred. Based on Trump being elected, we saw it be considered a hate. People said it was violence to wear hats that said MAGA. It was racist to wear hats that said MAGA. This, again, the difference was that these were voices with institutional power through our culture and through our political system that made all these claims. They spread verifiable lies. They accused Trump and his supporters of being racist.
I'm getting impatient. I'm sorry. Can you tell me how normal, average Americans like us can bridge the gap between the people who you are currently talking about and the people who you think are on the other side of it? What is the normal, average American thing? And it doesn't have anything to do with Dylan's Twitter or people we've elected.
Right. First, you could leave people finish their thoughts before you interrupt them. That would be a good place to start, I guess. Second,
I was
what we could do about
dude,
these
I'm
things.
sorry.
What I'm doing is, I noticed you didn't interrupt Dylan when he was blaming people like Matt Gaetz.
That's
and
because
things
I
like
was
that.
because that was the
Yeah.
opening statement.
Right.
Hold on.
Right.
Hold on.
but I'm assuming that-
Hold on. The reason for that is because I was controlling the time specifically. I left the room open, right? So free form discussion. I'm not trying to get involved. Remember I said that, right? So.
Anyways, the point I was trying to make is we could see that there was unprecedented amounts of division, and we can get into the reasons for this. There was populism that was occurring worldwide on the left and the right. You had sort of the Bernie Sanders type faction on the left. You had the Trump faction on the right. You had things like Brexit that was occurring in the UK. So leaders around the world understood that there was a lot of populism rising up, and so they needed to cause increased division. So the ways that they've caused those division are predictably by dividing us based on things like race, gender, sexuality, things like that. We could see that occur in unprecedented ways in 2016, or at least proportionally in ways that we haven't seen. We saw lies being spread about Trump being a Russian spy, etc. So they were lies.
What lies?
I'm so confused.
Wait, those weren't lies?
No, I'm asking what lies specifically you're talking about.
For example, we saw a coup attempt by the FBI that illegally spied on Trump's campaign using unverified opposition research that was sourced by a known Russian spy, things like that.
You think they were spying on his campaign?
Yes.
It's common knowledge that
They
the FBI
were
is spying
spying
on
on Carter Page.
Right. Through Bill Binney talks about this, who was a former NSA official, who was one of the people instrumental in developing our wiretapping policies. It's called the 2-hop rule. So when you could spy on someone and wiretap them through a FISA warrant, you get access to all of their communications, all of the communications of the people they talk to, and a second hop, all of the communications that those people talk to. So yes, by effectively having a FISA warrant on one person in Trump's campaign, they were able to get access to all of the conversations between him and everyone in the campaign. But anyways, I just bring it.
No, are you,
just
wait, sorry, are you against the 2-hop rule?
Wait,
just to
can I-
clarify?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
I'm against the FISA process, and but just real quick, just to get in the race thing. So we could see no one has a problem with talking about racism that occurred in the past. What we have a problem is like things like the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff talking about how he's reading books from Ibram X. Kennedy and Robin DiAngelo that are suggesting things like AIDS was created by white people to attack black people, and he's doing so because he needs to understand white rage. Meanwhile, they're saying things like Antifa's just an idea. They ask us to ignore the violence we saw for over a year that caused $2.2 billion of damage, and then they talk about how they want to focus on riots on the other side. What we could do as individuals is try to stop these people from being able to spread this division and understand that we're more collective, have individual voices, fight against things like attempts at censorship that both right-wing and left-wing politicians are trying to do, take back freedom of information on the internet, and encourage individual voices instead of these mainstream propagandists and the people that are in charge of our institutions that seem to be totally aligned with the mainstream Democratic Party at this point.
Okay,
so
fabulous.
Wait,
I would love to ask
wait,
a question really quick
that
about
was directed at me.
that was directed at you, actually. Yeah. So, do you have any solutions-based comments, Dylan?
Well, first I would say Tucker Carlson is a racist piece of shit. He called Iraqi people primitive monkeys. Rob Noor, do you believe Iraqis are primitive monkeys who can't use forks?
Wait.
That's his direct statements. I just wanted to ask you quick on that. He is a
I
racist.
believe he's apologized.
Joe
I believe he's
Biden also-
apologized for that.
Joe Biden
Right.
also called schools a racial jungle. So, I mean, do you want to continue down this road, Dylan? Is this really the road you want to continue down?
Okay, you
Yeah,
want to
this
call
is
Joe
not
Biden
really
a racist?
just
Wait, if
talking,
you
it's
called Joe
just
Biden a racist, do you think I would have stayed up and say, "Oh my God, I'm so offended"? I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have cared. I would have been like, "I can't believe Sprouticus tweeted out that Joe Biden is a racist," and you're trying to unite us, but you're dividing us, Sprout. I wouldn't have said that. If he wouldn't have
I
called
believe you were-
Iraqi people primitive
correct me if
monkeys,
I'm
I
wrong.
wouldn't have called him a racist, maybe.
No, I believe so. You're saying if he because I believe it was in context to his conversations about critical race theory, in particular about General Miley, and you called it the white supremacy hour because he was saying those things about Miley, criticizing Miley, talking about white rage.
Wait. I call it the white supremacy hour because Tucker Carlson hosts the show and he has a long history of making racist comments. That's something I've called it for a long time. It wasn't directly related to his comments of critical race theory, but I do want to note that he has no clue what critical race theory is and didn't know what anything about white rage is either. Because the thing is, he's criticized. Why I don't want to talk about the specific segment, but he's criticizing the general for bringing up white rage, and then refuses to talk about where that definition came from. He doesn't talk about the book that actually was read. And the thing is, I can read books I disagree with all the time. I read Invisible Hands, which talks about the founding of the conservative movement. I've read communist works as well, while not being a communist. People can read works to understand ideas and not dedicate themselves to everything in a book. Hell, I can read a book that says some things I agree with and some things I disagree with. I do that with politicians all the time.
Real quick, Dylan, that's different than putting him on a recommended reading list for our military.
Do you not think? Wait. So
like, would you not? Let me just ask you: if they put "Birth of a Nation" as a recommended film for our military to watch, would you be like, "Yeah, sounds reasonable"?
Yeah, it depends on the situation. For example, if
that's a lie, we all know that. Come on, man.
Okay. Well, Aircraft Sparky, tell me how it's a lie then. Tell me tell me what I'm about to say.
Point of this panel.
Please, I would love to hear.
Y'all are completely decimating the point of this panel. It's absolutely ridiculous
We're
to watch.
we're supposed to be talking about solutions. I'm not
Yeah.
sure
Can I
how we
just
got
ask-
here.
Can I just ask Rob a quick question?
Okay, let me expand.
I mean,
the
can
reason
we stop,
the
can we
situation.
stop going after people and come up with solutions to the problem instead of going after this long? Right now, we're going down this long.
I was going after. I was
This is
going
a
after.
diatribe.
I understand that,
Useless.
but I understand. But one of us,
Fair.
you know,
To be
you know,
fair, Dylan, you did launch into a bunch of ad hominem attacks on conservatives.
On conservative, I went after Matt Gaetz, and that's the only individual I specifically went after. And then I talked about shared reality, and then responded to other people's points on the panels. That's it.
You're right, but you laid pretty heavy into conservatism generally, right? And,
Yes,
and when
because-
you talk about like we have to get on the same page, we have to have the same set of facts. It seems like the only facts that matter to you and people who think like you are the ones that you like. The other side of the coin doesn't get any fair play, right? You guys want to talk about solutions. You want to talk about a solution, right? Make sure that the solution that you want to posit comport with the Constitution. And if you got a problem with the fact that the Constitution doesn't allow those things today, then work with your state legislature, work with your congressman and senator and the administration to get amendments passed so that you can make the Constitution do the things you want it to do.
Okay.
Federal funding for education is not a constitutional thing. It has been bastardized. It has been bastardized by the Congress and federal legislation to be able to do it. There is nothing in the Constitution that says the federal government has the responsibility for funding education.
But when the
when did I bring that up?
When the Constitution was written, the
It was
value
a
of
state
education.
reserved. It was
No,
a
like
state
this today.
reserved power. It is
Nobody knew
I'm not-
nobody knew the
okay.
importance of
I'm
education.
just giving up
like they
responding
do
to
today.
Okay.
This is not
You
the
know what?
point.
My God.
You know what? Someone's
Can I finish?
Okay,
Can I explain?
okay,
Wait,
okay.
I don't want everybody to just think that I just recommended
hold on,
Birth of a
hold on,
Nation as a
hold
film
on,
for everybody.
hold on,
Okay, can I explain my point?
Amazing grace, how
How
sweet the sound
Mhm.
that saved the rich like me. Right? All right. Now, this is kind of where I felt like the mic was a minute ago, right? For Heemdout. Was kind of where I lost point of the conversation, right? So, Dr. Heemdout, if you would please, sir.
Okay, thank you. So I think that first of all, just I'm gonna respond to a couple of things Rob said. So first of all, you said that people in MAGA hats are kind of like victimized, I guess you said, Rob? Just a yes or
we
no.
saw a lot of
Okay,
attacks
Okay, cool. Okay, thank you. So if I agree with you that people can be victimized, but don't you think that this is just the natural part of wearing political paraphernalia? When you have your political ideology stamped across your forehead, obviously you're opening yourself up for criticism. So that's the first thing. And second of all, when you're mentioning bringing people together, I don't think populism, left wing or right wing, is the right answer. More solution based problems and critically thinking and addressing these problems and letting experts help weigh in on these things rather than letting some random fucking the majority rule would help to bring people together. And also, if you want to bring people together, I just want to get a confirmation from you. Are you going to condemn Mitch McConnell for constantly blocking every piece of legislation? I just want to know, what do you think about what Mitch McConnell does in terms of dividing the nation? Do you think it's helpful or do you think it's harmful?
I think Mitch McConnell's terrible. I think that the establishment people in the Republican and Democratic Party are basically the same party. But if we're talking specifically about blocking things, we had unprecedented blockage from the Democrats during the Trump administration. Like, not even close. Like 314 filibusters were used just on his nominees alone. That was more than the previous 10 presidents combined.
Did he get them passed anyways?
What? Some of
about-
them?
Oh, okay. And what about Merrick Garland?
What does that have to do with the fact that, like, you wanted to put it to as just one person? I'm saying both parties are obstructionist.
No, I'm saying actually one party's more obstructionist than the other.
That's not even close. During the
Yes,
Trump
yeah, you're
administration,
100%
we saw-
right. It's the Democratic Party.
Right. Yeah.
Demonstrably,
It was
provably
unprecedented. Right.
You're telling me that the Democrats don't play ball as much as the Republicans do. Republicans are more willing to pass Democratic legislation.
No,
Yes, they're more willing to compromise with Democratic legislation than Democrats were with Republican. That's verified.
I'd love to see a source on that.
Sure, I'll
this
post the
is
political
congressional record.
unbelievable to me.
So I
right,
just want
Johnny-
to point out one thing, Dr.
Okay.
Heemdout. When I said my comment about the federal government not being responsible for education, funding education from the federal level, you said, "Are you against education?"
No, I never said that.
Okay.
I said, wait, sorry, just to confirm, I didn't say that. I said when the Constitution was written, the value of education then was not the same as the value of education today. Back then, you
No,
didn't need an education. You could
no,
have cattle and
Right. And my whole point, right? My whole point was that if you think that education should be funded for at the federal level, then make a constitutional amendment. Otherwise, it's a reserved power for the states. And the
for
states
sure,
can
yeah.
do whatever the hell they want.
Sure, yeah. I don't disagree with that. I'm advocating for something different, right? Like,
Okay.
I'm not saying that under the current
Okay,
situation.
then that's part of your
Yeah.
solution is you
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that that education should be amended so that the federal government is required to provide it.
Exactly. yeah.
That's fine. We could try to talk about how you would make that work, And what kinds of limitations or what kind of instruction should the federal government provide? And how would they then take funding off of that? That's a fair debate. Everything that you guys want to talk about could be an object for discussion in terms of amending the Constitution. My only point is that you just can't simply say the federal government exists to do X, Y, and Z and start ascribing powers to the federal government that aren't in the Constitution.
Does the federal government have to? Do they have a responsibility to care for their citizens?
No. They have a responsibility. They have a responsibility to provide a common defense and to create a framework that promotes general welfare, not provide general welfare. And when I did my intro, I explicitly stated that there is a difference, and the founders found that there was a difference between provide and promote.
Okay, so from here, because everybody wants to talk, what I want to do, right, is recenter the conversation, and we're going to start with Johnny, go to Sparky, down to Sprout, up to Dylan, okay? But we're going to recenter it around urban and rural areas, right, are growing apart ideologically. How do we bridge that gap to where these things can be understood better so that there's a consensus of, like, how to move forward? So
when it comes to lifestyles, when it comes to American citizenry and the lifestyles that affect how they vote and what we deem to be their overall ideology, there is money involved. There is the type of housing involved. Dr. Heimdall very rightly said that ecologically, as far as how we divide all of our land, as far as what is most valuable and what is most effective for housing people, suburbs are absolutely something that should not be they should not be funded, and they should not be laid out within land, whatever the hell it is. Whatever the hell it is that says what you can build on what land. That should not be a thing for suburbs. We ought to be consolidating, and when it comes to building in more rural areas, we ought to be building more consolidated housing so that we can conserve those rural areas in an ecological way. Now, what that is going to do is it is going to bring conservative rural areas into a new generation of people, because this will take a generation or two, is going to bring us into a new generation where people are not moving out to the suburbs to be alone, to be isolated, to further isolate themselves from the rest of America, which largely is what Southern people are doing in the suburbs. They are trying to live out a country dream in a city-like environment, and it's simply not working for our economy. It is busying up our roads, and it is having really, really bad overall effects on our environment. So things you need to know about me: I'm a green gay gun proponent. I'm queer as fuck. I like guns. And I believe in things being very green and ecological. Now, when we see these
you and Dr. Heimd real quick, I'm totally confused on this suburban thing. Are you suggesting that we should not allow homes to be built in the suburbs?
Oh, no, absolutely. The suburban housing plans and the housing planning for suburbs is a very specific type of housing plan that is extremely spread out. It only involves housing that is for one family, maximum of two, usually in Texas. And it is something that keeps a lot of people from being able to afford large houses because of the way that they're corporatized and, of course, the places in which they are built. So we're not saying that housing is a problem. We're saying that the specific plans that go into enacting something like a suburb plan is going to be very economically disadvantageous to the people who live there, as well as ecologically for the place that it is built on. Is that clear, Rob?
Can I just jump in piggyback as well? So just give me piggyback as well. It's also about zoning, right? Like I live in a place where like a grocery store is literally 30 seconds walk from me, and so is a gas station, and so are houses and schools. Everything is within very close reach of each other. So I don't need to go across town to go to the Canadian Tire because I have a hardware store that's 20 seconds walk from my house. I think these kind of zonings, multi-zoning situations just are a better situation than like sectioning people off to say, okay, you have to drive 10 minutes into this suburban subdivision to be able to find your house, and the closest grocery store is a 10-mile drive.
Exactly. It's a zoning issue. It's not a housing issue. So what I want to really quick wrap up this with, and I want to ask you guys a question. I have presented a couple of things that are very important for the rural communities in particular in order to get them up to speed, get them up to task on how technologically advanced and how comfortable we want American lifestyles to be. And so when we start doing that, we start to see the rural gap closing the divide. So if anybody here grew up in an especially metropolitan area, if you have seen the issues that are specific to these metropolitan areas, I would love to hear your opinion on how those areas in particular are languishing and how we can get those to sort of close the gap.
Rob?
I mean, I lived in a rural area. I think that you basically have a lot of this backwards. I think that most suburbs are being populated by people that are leaving urban areas. And I also think that you're actually going to see more.
It just depends on the suburb, babe. I don't think that's really a yes or no question.
Okay, but I think that you're actually going to see increased flight from cities to suburbs and rural areas because as we get more technologically advanced, people don't need to live as close together. You find that you're able to accomplish your career goals from more of remote locations. And I think that you're going to see people taking advantage of cheaper house prices in rural areas, in suburban areas, as opposed to urban areas. And I think that that's something that's naturally going to lead to more people mingling, which I think could be a good thing. I think if you get more urban people moving to more rural areas, that maybe people will realize, shit, these people are just like me. We're all hardworking. We all want the same thing. So, I don't know necessarily the problem zoning and things like that. I think that maybe these are things that, though, can potentially help, and it's sort of going to occur naturally. Maybe one silver lining of the whole COVID shit, that it kind of accelerated the pace at which people realized they could work from home and things like that.
Right.
So I still feel like I feel like we went way off topic and spent like 30 minutes going off topic when I don't know.
Well, it hadn't been 30 minutes. I'm watching the clock. I know what's going on.
Okay, in my mind it was 30 minutes. It seemed like a long time. But what
You're young, it'll get better.
So what I'm saying is that I'm gonna agree with Rob on this one. I think that people are moving out to suburbs. I think people are leaving the cities because the cities are failing. The urban areas are failing to address the problems they have on hand, and they'd rather do other things and spend their money on other things than actually fixing the problems they actually have. But like I said, if we have a common goal, right? If we have a common goal, we can bring these two areas together to where because the whole question is whether or not we can bring these two areas together where we agree, not necessarily agree, but where we can not be as distant from one another as far as political ideology is concerned, right? And so if we humanize the other side, right? If you don't attack someone who is wearing a MAGA hat just for simply because of wearing a MAGA hat, realize they're a human. You didn't see that with anyone wearing hope hats with President Obama, right? Former President Obama. You didn't see that with him. You see that with Trump. So with that being said, I think that the first step would be humanizing the other side, and then the second step would be finding a common goal that we can all work towards. That is a bipartisan effort, not something such as healthcare or what Dr. Heimdall suggested. Let's find an actual bipartisan effort and not put a lefty effort in there to try and disguise it as a bipartisan effort.
Okay, so I'm really ready to jump in here because I was supposed to go after Johnny, so I'm just...
You haven't spoken at all, and the next Brittany hasn't spoken at all, so we're going to get you two in, and then we'll kick it up to MPU.
Okay. So let me go ahead and read this off to you. It's from the 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution or prohibited by the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So these ideas of federal education programs, the Department of Federal Education shouldn't even exist, for Christ's sakes. Most actual bureaucratic departments should not exist by the Constitution. Learn it, read it, love it. If not, amend it. When you're talking about things like abolish suburbia, here is the deal. Look, yes, the land costs a little bit of money. Get a trade, get a skill, and try, I don't know, buying land instead of living on top of each other in filth-ridden, piss-smelling cities. Hey, you go to a big city, that is exactly what exists. Every
time I go to the country, it smells like manure and shit, by the way. Just wanted to make that clear.
That's the smell. That's the smell of the things that actually feed you.
Why you don't want to live there, right?
No, it's
no,
wait,
I
you
love
can't
the
just like
country.
insult
Dylan,
cities and
Dylan.
not
Hey,
expect
I'd really like to
clapback.
say,
Oh my
I'd really like to say
God.
really quickly, we're not against suburbs, babe. We are not against people living where they want to live. Yes, Dylan, I'm sorry, I interrupted you talking about manure. We are not against people choosing where they want to live. Aircraft Sparky, I want to address this to you. We are against the zoning specifically for only
To
single family
participate
housing.
in public elections.
N-
That is how you
What?
fix that. Zoning is
Wait,
controlled by your local
yes, I vote.
boards. So actually go out and vote in your local
Wait,
elections.
what did
That's
That's
you
how
what
think
you
we were
control
saying?
zoning.
Do it by force? Did you think we meant
Babe,
do it by force?
So no, I'm looking.
think-
I'm
hold
looking at my notes and
quarter of a wall.
Hold on.
all these ridiculous ideas here. We've got
No.
Dylan talking about.
Like, so specifically, I think maybe there is some confusion with what's being said by both sides, right? So, Sparky, right, clarify your position, and then we'll get Dylan, right, to clarify their position, because local versus federal, right? This is where, like, people keep bringing up the Constitution, but at least to get into that. So, you take it away. We're going to go to Dylan, then MPU, and
So
actually, hold on. We're going to skip Brittany if we do that, right? So
yeah,
we'll
Brittany should
go
probably
Sparky,
go
then
next.
Brittany,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So Dylan, I realize you got hair, but hers is better. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you, brother. Right? So Sparky, Brittany, then we'll go to Dylan, MPU. Okay, take it away.
Okay, so as I let off, the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment is what is actually the problem here. If you have a problem with the 10th Amendment, work on getting a convention of states. This idea of getting rid of suburbia to consolidate housing. No, that already exists in urban areas. Most people are trying to escape that. Should we make it easier? Sure, we could talk about that. But when it comes to zoning and stuff, that is all down to public, not federal. Federal has absolutely nothing to do with that. When it comes to things like Dr. Heen, he's like, oh, well, if we bring all the manufacturing back to America, it would make things more expensive. Well, really, there's a way that can actually not happen, and that's by, I don't know, doing things like abolishing the minimum wage and actually allow the economy to handle things on its own.
I didn't say it was going to be more expensive. I said automation would replace it.
Yes, and automation is very simple. You know how you work with automation? You learn
Yes,
how to
I
fix
do.
things.
No,
So,
automation. There's if
someone
you
is always
don't
gonna have
replace,
to
you
fix
don't
something.
replace 50,000 factory workers with 50,000 people
no,
that
you don't.
fix
You
the
learn
automation.
skills, though, you get in where you fit in, sir. And that is
how
what
that
you've always got to
manufacturing?
do.
How is that manufacturing?
You do realize that there's more to manufacturing than just standing on a line and pressing a button or something,
I
right?
do
You know?
realize that. I do
Okay, so
realize
there's
that,
maintenance, there's
but
programming, there's all
what I'm
different,
saying is,
it's all
by
different
bring-
aspects to it.
What I'm
Okay,
saying
Jesus
is,
Christ.
by bringing those jobs back, you're not going to replace, get all those jobs of the people who lost their jobs in manufacturing. Now, all of a sudden, getting their jobs back in manufacturing. Those jobs will still be lost to automation, and a select few people that have the expertise will be running the automation.
Better learn a trade, huh?
What
As
about
far
the
as the
people who don't learn
TPP,
trades? Wait 1 second. What about the people who don't learn trades?
survival of
Simple
the fittest, third.
Simple
When it
answer.
So,
comes to the
so what you're saying
TPP,
is fuck the people that did the
Hey,
manufacturing. then.
Heen, remember this on the immigration topic. Just remember
Yes.
what you're saying right now.
yes.
Okay.
On the TPP, thank you for your endorsement of slavery, the left. Great job. I am sick and tired of
Wow.
seeing people, oh, we want to do the TPP. Yes, while Apple and Microsoft and all these grand companies are literally paying people pennies on the day for their work, you are doing nothing but endorsing slavery while ignoring the problems in America. I hope you enjoy your lattes. Jesus Jones. And that's really all I've
Talk about
got.
solutions.
Wait, no. I was told I would get to respond to that. Okay, so far I've been told. So Dylan, you want to increase racism. You want to make everybody watch Birth of a Nation, and you want to bring back slavery internationally. Man, this is really a unifying panel I've brought myself in today. You can be like, Dylan, well, you're not bringing the unity either. Well, I think calling my cities, telling me they smell like shit isn't a good way to get me into Unity Bus. Right. But let me just be clear. Tucker Carlson actually did not apologize ever. He actually specifically said, I do not apologize for what I said with Bubba the Love Sponge. He specifically avoided apologizing for the Iraqi comment. And when it comes to the the idea that we're bringing back that it's slavery internationally. You just said you wanted, so your plan is to bring slavery here because you want to abolish the minimum wage. And the thing is, you don't know what the TPP is, because the TPP is it's a Trans-Pacific Partnership, increased workers' rights in all of these countries. It had to do with the rights to unionize. It had to do with the rights for these countries to have higher standards of labor. It had to do with environmental standards for every single country involved, whether it be Vietnam or the rest of them. All of their environmental and worker. What the fuck are you saying? I can't hear myself saying.
China.
Okay.
Oh,
So
Foxconn, China. Okay, good words. Okay,
we've got
I'm happy you've learned a few.
there's an active hashtag going on in the Wolf's Den chat, right? And this is the chat that I'm paying attention to, right? There's an active hashtag going. It's hashtag Free Britney. Right? Hashtag Free Britney, right? I don't look. It's trending right now in the Wolfpack chat, right? Hashtag Free Britney. Right? Oh goodness,
that's hilarious.
Okay, so
we're gonna free Britney, right? We got to do it, folks. Right? If that's any solution that we can get to right now, let's get to that one. So hashtag Free Britney, right? Go ahead.
Again, you can say Lamau Dylan. You're just.
What just happened? Bad
Hashtag
Dylan.
Free Britney. Free Britney.
Okay.
No, not free Dylan.
Gotta free her, and then we'll kick it back up to Dylan, right? But right now we gotta free Britney.
No, wait. I'm after Brittany.
Oh no! Fuck! Holy fucking shit! Jesus, how much freeing do I got to do tonight? My goodness, I'm trying to let her out of the cage, folks. Right? She hasn't talked this entire fucking time. Is there anybody else who wants to say a fucking thing right now? Needs to understand she hasn't talked the whole fucking time. So shut the fuck up. Hey.
All right. I'm gonna go.
Brittany,
Okay, so a few things that people were saying. If you want to change something, just go make an amendment. Vote. When these are usually they tend to be the same people that have kind of rigged the system to make it like nearly impossible to do anything like that. With we have the Electoral College, we have voter suppression. The filibusters, all these. I mean, they know it's just not a realistic thing to be able to actually change a freaking amendment unless we make some actual real changes as well. Also, when I think it was the air guy, or what's his name?
Aircraft Sparky.
Aircraft Sparky. When he said something about the getting rid of federal education. One thing about that, I think I don't know if this is true, but it just seems that a lot of conservatives probably don't like paying taxes. You don't ever seem to get them in return. You get nothing in return. Where are our taxes going? Because I don't feel them ever. I think we need to invest in a way that people really feel that their taxes are coming back to them, and they might not be so uptight with spending. So investing more in our education and our infrastructure, and seeing our taxes being put to good use. And then I had one question for Zach, because he said, if we have our common goal, what's our common goal?
And that's something, that's something I hope we could talk about. But it seems to me that people just want to be divisive on the panel and talk about left versus right instead of finding out what that common goal is. I was hoping that would lead into a conversation about what that common goal is, but it hasn't done that so far.
Yeah, I just think a lot of people are more into the instant gratification instead of investing in the long term. That's just
planting seeds for gardens that you will never see.
So where we're going to go from here, right, is Dylan, wrap up the last point and get us into solutions, brother. I know you can.
Just to be clear, I don't endorse slavery.
It's not.
I endorse increasing the standards of labor in these countries and lowering the cost of consumer products in the United States, which is what the TPP would have done. It was revolutionary in that aspect due to the increase of workers' rights that was going to be put in Vietnam and a lot of these countries that we're doing deals with. I feel that is a terrible misrepresentation of what I believe. All these statements, I guess we gotta throw them all away and forget about them. All the stuff I wrote down. When it comes to common ground, I honestly let somebody else talk. Honestly, I don't care.
All right. There are
MPU.
people.
Real quick, Johnny. MPU. I know you've
sorry,
been waiting.
I'm sorry. I'm like,
Okay.
wow.
So oddly enough, Johnny, I'm going to give you a chance to answer something. Okay.
All right.
You talk about like the spreading the population out from the cities and moving them into multi-unit housing within the suburbs, changing the zoning laws, right? What's the mechanism by which that occurs? How is it going to be paid? What is the underlying intent in terms of distributing or pushing out more federal dollars into the suburbs, building these things? What's going to be the tax representation for that? And then, and is the state the better place for that policy to happen? Is the locality that does zoning laws the better place for that to happen now? And then for and I think you made a comment about land prices, and that it's so expensive out in the country, in the more rural areas or in the suburbs. The reason why that is, right, is because people find it desirous to be there. But in relative terms, it is still significantly more expensive to buy property in Manhattan than it is to buy Manhattan, New York, than it is to buy in Manhattan, Kansas.
Mhm.
Okay, so I think that the argument about land cost is a little bit dubious. And then for Dr. Heemdout, the Biden administration, they actually wanted to use the federal government to force, multi-unit housing to override local zoning laws. So that is an actual, honest to God fact. He wanted HUD to actually create a ruling which would violate or usurp local or state control authority over zoning laws. And then your last point, Dr. Heemdout, when you said that people that get displaced by technology, automation, right? Whenever new technologies come in, it always has an impact in the short run on people who work and do certain things where the technology is replaced. What happens is that a new set of skills, a new set of industries grows out to support the automation, and I think that that's fine. I think if you want to make those kinds of arguments about what do we do in the interim, right, to help those people, that's a states' rights argument. I think the states should be looking at what kinds of automation, what kind of economies they're trying to build, and they should bring forward those dollars, those training programs, in order to facilitate that transition to make it easier on people. I don't think that it's necessarily a federal government responsibility to fix these things. I'm not saying they're not legitimate problems or concerns, right? My argument is that the
Look how long he gets to talk and ramble. And I can't even declare that I don't want all the troops to just watch Birth of a Nation cheering in Klan hoods. Can't do it. I just can't. Oh my God.
who are voting for the policies, right? It's scratch my back, I'll scratch your back, and this is the way it goes. And don't worry about it. We'll take all the money from the rich people and we'll just sort of give it out a little bit to the poor people, right? Because there's more poor people. I'll finish it up right here. There's more poor people than there are rich people. So it's a lot easier to sort of coerce them, into thinking that, yeah, if you vote for me, I'm going to take care of your needs. And don't worry about it. It's not going to cost you anything. We'll just take it from these guys over here who, quote unquote, don't pay their fair share.
Okay,
Johnny.
Oh, sorry, Johnny, go ahead.
I did not entirely intend for my answers to this question to be put in the frame of federal or state. I was
Same.
I was originally intending this to be, how do we as Americans bridge the ideological divide? Because I don't necessarily see that divide as being on a federal or state legal line. I don't think that that's something that you can legislate. I think that it's cultural. I really genuinely believe that we have more in common than we do apart, something that Rob said earlier. And part of that is shown when you see that there were a lot of rural elderly men in Louisiana who were very much for Bernie Sanders because they saw him as a Huey P. Long. I always think that's a really interesting little fact. So, and that's specifically in Louisiana, but I want to bring this farther out to when you educate people about what their options are and you give them the ability to choose what they're going to vote for as far as their best interests. They are going to do it largely on a state by state basis because our states are so wide ranging in their geological formations, in their ability to have a large economy, etc. And so even in New Orleans versus Northern Louisiana, you have a very large blue-red divide right there because there are some people who are voting very red and there are some people in the more put-together cities who are voting very blue. And we see that a lot in Louisiana stuff. When the Louisiana votes come up, we see that New Orleans divide, essentially. So what I think is the best solution option that is not based around specifically legislating and telling people what the hell they have to do is to engage in conversation that is, yes, to engage in conversation that leads to people actually doing what Aircraft Sparky told me the hell I should do, which is go to your federal and your legislation in your state, and you need to speak to them and say, hey, fund education in rural areas, make sure that rural kids as well as inner city kids have the skills when they graduate high school to support themselves, and maybe they won't fucking fight over tax money as much when they graduate high school. Now, I have a lot more to say about how rural communities could be improved, but I realize that that's a really one-sided area to this argument, and so I will definitely pass it on. And I'm still glad to be here, you guys.
Can I respond?
Dr. Handout?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So okay. So I think I might have been misunderstood why I brought up the public funding of the education. I didn't mean that it necessarily has to be from the federal government. What I was trying to say is that there seems to be people that are just left behind because the public education system is letting them down. I'm wondering if any of the conservatives on this panel are against standardized education. Like I'm assuming that when American children are going to public education schools, that you expect some level of education to be taught to them, right? So all I'm saying is that it's important to keep the education standardized, whether you have standardized testing or whatnot. Like here in Canada, we have a standardized test that measures the school's ability to teach the children. It's not anything to do with how the children do. It doesn't matter if you do well or poor on the exam. It literally just measures how well the school is doing in teaching you the curriculum. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, the reason I brought up zoning and suburbs was because I was trying to explain that, like, the reason that there's a big divide is because people just don't have the exposure to people of different backgrounds as much as they should. I'm someone who's lived in rural areas, and I've lived in big cities, and I've lived in the LGBTQ village. I've experienced a lot of these things, and I think having this exposure to people of different backgrounds is super, super important. And lastly, when you guys brought up that the government isn't using the tax money correctly or whatever, I tend to agree with you that there are a lot of things that tax money is failing people on, for example, infrastructure or healthcare. But the problem is, Republicans, all they ever advocate for is cutting taxes. So whereas some of these things just require funding in order to be solved. And basically, I think those are my main points.
If I could just
Dr. Hindout, there's an issue. You brought up standardized testing, right? Standardized testing is absolutely awful. Whether you're talking about it being for the student or for the teacher, it doesn't matter. The only thing.
Wait, one second. Can I interrupt you? Let me interrupt you. I want to ask you a question. When people go to medical school, do you think they should have standardized testing so we can know whether they understand stuff before they go into the medical school?
Okay, I thought we talking about collegiate education. We talk about K through 12.
Well, I'm trying to. You said standardized testing is absolutely useless.
Are we talking about collegiate education? We talk about K through 12.
You're talking about something that's actually controlled through state licensing.
If you answer that fucking question, right? If you answer that question, I will be able to answer yours.
I will tell you. I'm not specifying. Wait, 1 second.
12?
I am not specifying. I'm saying standardized education is important.
Okay, I was talking about K through 12. So I would disagree with you in K through 12 because the only thing standardized testing does is it shows you what students are good at taking tests and what students aren't. There are very bright students that just don't take tests very well. And
no,
yes, there are. I don't want to hear that, Dr. Hindout, that there aren't bright students that can't take tests. There are bright students that are very bad at taking tests.
Okay.
I believe it was Albert Einstein who said, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, then it'll live its whole life believing it's dumb.
You think testing somebody on something is asking a fish to climb a tree?
Yeah, I don't
standardized testing in schools, yes, that is for some kids asking a fish to climb a tree because it's extremely hard for some kids to do standardized.
What about any testing in general?
No, I don't think testing in general is bad.
How was me responding to this is the last time I complained about it. How was me responding to all the stuff that was thrown back at me when I was responding to other people's stuff off topic, but them talking about standardized testing isn't?
Yes, absolutely, Dr. Heimdall, right? Because right now, and we've got about 3 minutes left. 3 fucking minutes. I want to be able in those 3 minutes to have Rob, Sparky, Dylan, would you like to speak?
I wasn't prepared for discussion on standardized testing. I don't have much to say.
Yeah, exactly. Me fucking neither, right? That's why I bothered putting these things out ahead of time so we kind of knew where we were talking about, right? So, and in no way has anybody laid this to a correlation to how we solve the ideological difference between urban and rural areas, which is kind of where we're supposed to be at with. So,
Secession.
Rob,
Right.
we got, okay.
I'll try my best. Yeah, it's weird that this became testing and suburban issues. Just real quick, I think that suburban is somewhat of a bridge between rural and urban. So it seems like an odd place to start with. The way we solve this division is just eliminate the suburban class. I don't know. Just seems like a weird thing. As far as testing, look, let me try to steelman Dr. Heem down. I don't think you're advocating standardized testing as much as standardized education.
Exactly,
So I don't
yeah.
think you really give a shit about the test. You say we should have an expectation that you're getting this minimal level of education if you go to an inner city Baltimore school or an Appalachian school.
Yeah,
I
like
agree.
evolution's a big one, right? Like we should have the students you should know when you're sending your kid to school that they're learning about evolution. No.
Okay, I agree, but the problem is we could see that what's being taught and what's being pushed is critical race theory and other race essentialism, which actually says things like standardized testing is racist and expecting students of color to learn the same way and the same things as white students is racist. That's why I said that when we're talking about the rural-urban divide, one of the first things we need to do to solve this divide is fight back against this intentional division, claiming that white people and black people can never understand each other, and rural people and urban people can never understand each other. This race essentialism that holds that all white people have original sin and all white people are racist or are privileged, etc., needs to stop, because this is one of the things, we could see this issue occurring more than any other issue causing division in our country right now. Race relations are getting worse and worse, and vis-a-vis then the rural and urban divide is getting worse and worse because people in positions of power are intentionally making everything about race. That doesn't mean we don't talk about slavery, but we stop saying that everything is because of race. We stop maximizing the effects of racialism and race essentialism. The last thing I'll say in order to solve this is I completely disagree with Dr. Heem that populism isn't a way to bring the divide together. The populism was based on the fact that people around the world are understanding that their governments are corrupt and that they don't give a shit about the inner city and they don't give a shit about rural America. And if people come together and realize that movements like Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party basically agreed on 90% of stuff, and actually Bernie supporters and Trump supporters, they might heavily disagree on a bunch of cultural issues, but when it comes to the idea of our government not working for the people, they both agree on that. If we could bring people together based on that, the fact that the people in positions of power in our institutions have left behind the vast majority, over 90% of the people in this country and around the world, then we could start to come together and have a common goal that we could achieve. That's the important thing. Instead, what we see right now, it is an embracement by people in positions of power focusing on dividing us based on things like race and focusing on putting out talking points and defending one side of the party. But make no mistake about it, it's not just Democrats. The establishment Republicans, the Mitch McConnells, the Mitt Romneys, they're in on this shit too. They're in on it too. And so we need to, some real things you could do, run for office if you actually care for people. Intentionally have dialogues with.
That is time's up.
Go into communities that aren't your own and get to know people. Go into communities that need help that you're not necessarily from and volunteer and give them help. Things like that could do much more than expecting our leaders that don't give a shit about any of us to actually do something about it.
Sparky, you got 1 minute, right? And then we're transitioning.
Too easy. So, look, one of the things that Johnny was talking about is talking about getting infrastructural things out into rural America. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, there's many plans that have been suggested on both sides of doing things like getting internet infrastructure and stuff like that into the rural community. That is one of the reasons why I actually mentioned that we need to actually bring manufacturing back to America. Because, look, all this rhetoric, all this rhetorical garbage, all this my feelings and how we talk to each other, all that changes when the economics get put into it, because the common goal traditionally amongst every American is they want to live a good life. How do you do that? You do that through economics. Everything else tends to follow suit. So I can agree to a point on what Johnny is talking about. We do need to bring more infrastructural stuff into the rural communities. When it comes to things like the urban communities, we need to bring manufacturing, because right now all it is a consumerist black hole. And if we did things like that, the rhetoric wouldn't matter because people would be making money and would be happy. They'd be gainfully employed. Idle hands are the devil's work. Just say.
Okay. Not gonna lie. I'm so glad there's some nice banjo music playing in the background. Helps keep the tone and the levity, just right.
An aircraft, Sparky said, will never happen, even in the most wild fantasy wet dream of protectionists. It's true.
Potential solution, right? It seems to me that there are different concerns when it comes to urban and rural areas, and because urban people live in a much closer knit group together, right? That a lot of their policies are rooted in the idea of them being able to say not necessarily trust their fellow man, but trust that the government is actually going to instill some kind of order between them. Would that be fair?
Yeah.
So this is the part where
Okay.
like everybody in the room now speaks directly to me instead of each other. I mean, maybe I should make that clear, right?
I mean,
So,
I,
that again.
I mean, I don't think we have. I don't think we ever actually. I don't think we ever actually addressed the topic. I tried.
so then just
No, you
just address what it is that I'm saying, right? So that's
So-
what it seemed like. Because of the differences with urban and rural people, urban people tend to want to trust the government that they're living under more so than their fellow man, and that's why they put these different types of laws in place. Does that seem accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't. If I could push
Yeah.
back a little on that, I don't know, but I'm guessing some of the folks that maybe live in the city, I think some of them, if you're here, don't you have massive distrust of many of your governments? I mean, for God's sakes, one of the biggest movements in this country is accusing all forms of government of being systemically racist. So that's massive distrust in these institutions.
Yeah,
Depends
so
on
then
what
that's-
type
it's-
of government
I
you're.
think
I
that
mean, you
just
bring
real
up a
quick, I think that it's ridiculous then that they think that the solution to
No,
it
no,
is
I get it. I get
There you
it.
go.
I get it. Right. So, like, you bring up a good point, right? Like, there's an apparent hypocrisy in wanting to put power into the government instead of being able to trust your fellow man, right? So,
Well,
It
I mean,
seems like
if you thought that the government was systemically racist, then you would say, "I'm going to do everything I can to get people I trust in these positions." So I don't blame that. Like I get where that idea. I'm just saying I think that there's a healthy distrust of government on both sides of the aisle, both
Yeah.
urban and rural, and
But
they're
Rob-
right to be distrustful.
I don't think people who are saying that there's systemic racism are having a lack of trust in the government. They're just acknowledging that the deck of cards that they've been dealt since they've been born are such that that it's an unfair kind of playing
but-
field.
but-
Not that there's some sort of intention to be racist or something like this.
Mahim, I
No,
mean,
I
you gotta.
disagree.
I mean, like, it seems like that if they're pointing those things out, I can't say that they actually trust those institutions. If they're, and when that's kind of where this particular, like, nut down on the idea, right, is trust.
Like Dr. Heem, like real quick, isn't law enforcement an agent, the enforcement arm of government? Do you think there's distrust of that area
There
of the
is,
government?
yeah, for sure. In that area, there is.
Okay.
But also, I would say there would do people who also think there's systemic racism, let's say black people, do they also not lean on welfare or social services, these kind of things? So obviously they trust in some situations, right? Like
But that's
it's not a
different.
blanket. You're
Taking
making a
advantage-
blanket. You're making
Yeah,
a blanket
those are-
statement.
They're
That's
different
not-
types of government. Just because you trust your government to pay somebody to build your roads doesn't mean that you trust your government to make sure that you're going to be safe in every situation that you or the police may put yourself into. Those are completely different entities, and the people who go into those entities of government are trained in different ways. So I do think that yes, there's distrust and there is trust on the rural or the city side, but I think it depends on the type of government that you're talking about. And I
But
wish
it
that
seems-
Rob had been a little
it's-
more specific.
Yeah, so then it seems that it seems like the most logical solution here, and you guys can let me know if you agree with this, right? But let's assume for a minute that I'm putting a message out to the American people, right? And I'm trying to convey what the simplest idea is for them to be able to understand this very complex issue, right? to me, the most simplest idea is, one, you, the individual, need to take a real interest in what's going on with your local, county, and state governments, because that's where the majority of these issues actually should be solved via the 10th Amendment, because we definitely heard that argument during this discussion, right? So you have to also, at the same time, be okay with things happening in other states that don't directly affect you, and then educating those people in those other areas that are friends of yours that you might have concern with about how they can best, go about getting those issues addressed in their locality. And if for whatever reason they actually can't get the type of change there that they want, then perhaps maybe look at another living situation, because that may just not be the right state for you.
So,
And that right there, that's a real hard-nosed way to look at it, right?
Can
But
I,
at
can
the
I
end of the
point out
day,
something though, real quick?
oh,
though?
we can't point out nothing right now. There's a
Okay.
very specific time slot that we have for these things, right? Right now is the solution part. This is where I was listening for the majority of this. Even though it got off the rails, it went different ways. I'm trying
There's
to
only
follow
two
you guys.
solutions offered. I mean, to be fair.
So this is where I'm trying to make sure this thing is centered, because I want an actual solution, a message, right? So it's a real hard-nosed thing to say, move to another state. The reality is that no matter whether you're on the left or on the right, whether you're liberal or conservative, or whatever the case is, if the policies that are being put into effect in those states don't reflect how you would like to be able to live your life, the great fucking truth of this country is that because of the infrastructure built the way that it is, you can move to another state without actually having to go through the process of, say, getting papers to cross state lines.
Like
That's that.
then the solution, your solution then doesn't seem to answer the fundamental question. Your solution
is?
would be, okay, the question was, how do we close the rural urban divide? It seems like this solution would be, well, fuck the divide. Let's just have the people that want to live one way go one place, and people that want to live the other way go another place. Maybe that is the answer. Who cares about the divide? Let's just let's have a baseline of how we treat people as human beings and say, look, we should have more of a federalist system. And if people want to be divided and California wants to be one way and Texas wants to be another way, so be it. But I don't think that's solving the rural urban divide. That you know what I mean? To me,
Right,
that
'cause
would probably exacerbate it.
Well, that's where this
I don't think
specific
that's
question wouldn't. This specific question, though, would be more of a local and state question. I don't know why everybody, and perhaps maybe that's my fault with having us talk about your framework of the Constitution to begin with. So I'll take that one on the chin, right?
Look,
We
I think
weren't
one
able.
thing we could all
We
agree
weren't
on.
able to. We weren't able to
I
get away.
guarantee everyone will agree on this. More involvement from regular people in government and in these institutions is one thing I think we could all agree at your local level, at your state level, and if you're capable at the federal level. Like, I might disagree with Dylan on a lot, but I trust that Dylan actually gives a shit about people in his community. And I think that it's a good thing that he's involved so heavily in politics at the local level and with federal politicians. And if more people got involved like that, I think one of the problems we have is that it's regular people, quote unquote, just viewed like it's an alien thing. Oh, politics, it's just something I bitch about. No, you could get involved. You could get involved right now in your town. And if we had more regular people that aren't doing it for a paycheck or doing it because, they're card-carrying members of this political ideology, I think that would be a good thing.
Yeah, I would say that getting involved locally for the majority of the issues that affect you is where you're going to want to do that. So, solution, if you have an issue, find out what's going on with your local government, because that's where you're going to be able to see the most change in our system, right? Okay, now we're going to shift gears to the second question, right? Which is, secondly, we will hopefully get to solutions. And yes, and if you
No outro, so I'll never be able to respond to the the birth of a nation or the Antifa as an ideology or Joint Chiefs of Staff, none of it. Okay.
how it relates to foreign policy, border enforcement, considering there has been problems for more than a few decades now. How can we use the system that is in place to move us towards a situation where the government is actually protecting its constituents? Now, I'll say this to begin with. Each one of you that is here, I have a lot of respect for. You're here You guys know what you're talking about, and I appreciate your participation. So, with that said, we're going to change it up just a little bit here. We're going to start in the corners, right? Sprouticus and then Johnny, and then we're going to, and I'm actually going to, I might randomize it. We'll see what happens, but we're going to start there. So, Sprout, if you would, take us away on this one.
Okay. I think how we should approach foreign policy and border enforcement is that we should start now enforcing the laws that are on the books. We shouldn't just randomly allow people in and to allow them just to walk around and do whatever they want to see if they come to the court date. That's not how we should run our country. We need to gauge how many people are coming in. We need to understand how many people are coming in, because when people who come in who aren't authorized to come in, guess what? They take a slot away from somebody who's been waiting so long to come into the United States of America. They don't get to cheat the rest of the system because they decided to come in illegally. That's not how this works. Of course, if they have a political asylum or an asylum of any kind of sorts, we should take a look at it. But we surely should not allow them to just roam freely in the country and just hope they come back to the court date. So we need to be stricter on border enforcement. And then I think that would do a lot of good for our immigration policies and foreign policies.
Johnny Scarlett.
So I wrote down a lot of ideas. I'm no foreign policy expert, but I wrote down several concrete ideas for things that we could do to not only decrease the flux, the over encumberment at our borders, but also a couple of questions that I had, because of course I am no expert. So one thing that I think would be a very southern-based solution, something we could do at the borders, is to have an integration process wherein we have publicly run boarding houses in major cities, which double as hostels for citizens and travelers. So if you want to have these people who are currently being housed at the border, everyone is calling it camps, everyone's calling it inhumane. Well, you know what? You want to take these people who are seeking asylum, you want to integrate them into American society, put them into a house where they can actually speak with Americans, where they can actually interact with people, and where they can go out and be in a city in close proximity to be able to get a job. And they can be housed in a way that is not necessarily going to keep them on a certain campus forever and cause other people to call that camps. So this is obviously more of a southern-based solution. It's a physical solution for the influx of people at the borders. Now, we don't just have people at the borders. We also have people who are overstaying visas. And so we have the responsibility as the American government to audit these visas and to also audit even state-run, even publicly run farms and labor type jobs where people are often being paid less than minimum wage, and they are often migrant workers who aren't here on legal visas. So auditing these different types of jobs, auditing these labor fields so that we can make sure that everyone in these labor fields is someone who is documented is going to be very important. Now, when it comes to people who are not in one of these major labor fields where they would be easily identifiable, for instance, in Louisiana, you have the sweet potato farms where it is well known that many undocumented workers work there. That would need to be audited in Louisiana in particular. We also have people who overstay school visas. And me personally, I'm not entirely sure on how these people are going to be not helping the population overall. If they're here, they're integrated, and they are here because they went to school and they integrated themselves and they don't want to go back to their home country, so they overstayed their visas. I personally would ask questions. I would say, what do we do about these people? Apparently, they're the largest amount of immigrants that we have in this country, and I'm not entirely sure if it should be on a case-by-case basis, if it should be largely audited as well. But as far as my concrete ideas, that's about where I stop. And also, I think the stream has effed.
It did, and I apologize for that.
That's okay.
I'm still streaming.
Cool.
No, it's
F in chat for CTV rip.
Yeah. I really want you guys, while we're waiting for it to come back on, I really want you guys to pick apart that hostel idea, because it's something that I think would really integrate people into a new city, into a new society, if they really do want to be if they really do want to defect to America. I think it's something that would be a great opportunity for people, but I also realize it would come with a lot of dangers, and I want you guys to pick it apart for me if you don't mind.
It's an interesting idea.
Thank you.
Thank everybody for their patience, because this is something that I'm having to get used to. The connection being what it is for the moment while I'm getting the ISP out. Yes, for anybody that's asking, my connection is in fact hardlined directly to the router and then the router to the modem. So this is definitely an ISP problem, and they are going and have been catching an earful already. So that said, MPU, take it away, sir.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of fundamental issues, right, with immigration and border policy. One, as Spartacus was saying, we don't enforce the laws that we have, so we have to apply that. And we could talk about the concept of what is a refugee is defined. That's also defined in law currently. But what happens is that people are coached when they come up across the border to make a certain claim, they credible fear, right? So they know they've been given the buzzwords to figure out how to get across, and then they get in. The bottom line is 92% of all asylum claims are rejected, and the people would go back home if they in fact could be caught. Okay. I think it is true that about 80-ish% of people who get a court case will actually go. So I think it has been said that, they never show up for court, but enough of them don't show up for court that you can't just keep fostering a system where it's open and you keep letting people come across the border. Right. So what is the real fundamental problem? It's not economic circumstances in these other countries. It's that we make it incredibly easy for undocumented workers to come into this country and to live. And your point about having a hostel, or basically a halfway house for illegals, okay, where they can sort of transition into society, is irrelevant, because it's illegal for them to be here to begin with. And when we have to do a couple of things. Okay. There is the E-Verify system, which is voluntary for states to participate in. If it were made mandatory and it were a crime, a legit, you go to prison CEO of a company, HR person of a company, and your company gets fined tens of thousands of dollars per occurrence for hiring undocumented workers, what would happen is that these companies would stop hiring at confiscatory negative wage rates. I agree with you. They're getting paid either cash money under the table, or they're getting paid below minimum wage. And the threat is that if you don't go along, we'll report you. And they're never going to report them because they don't want to be found liable. Okay. So the E-Verify system being made mandatory would be a thing, and with stiffer, sharper teeth in the penalties, would keep companies from hiring undocumented workers to begin with. And then the whole argument says, well, these people do jobs that people in America don't want to do. That may be true, right? But if you don't restrain that growth first, you won't be able to get an accurate count of what actual labor you need to augment your economy with. And if we decide that we need more labor to affect certain industrial outcomes that we want, then we can through legislation at the federal level, open up new kinds of immigration policy that would allow these people to come in. So we wouldn't have to worry about halfway houses, right? To get people in and get them acclimated. We just need to make sure that the laws that we have on the books are there, and that we actually put real teeth and penalties against businesses who engage in the practice of hiring illegals. And then we can figure out what we need in terms of actual honest immigration reform, and we can work at a common sense consensus solution to what that is.
Dr. Heemdowd. Boy,
Okay.
sir.
Hey, so I think I'm the only immigrant on this panel. I'm glad that there's representation. So I just want to tell you guys a quick story about myself. So when my parents wanted to emigrate out of Iran, They applied for USA, Canada, and Australia, and it took them 6 years to hear from any of those 3 countries, and Canada was the first one, which is why I now live in Canada. So who knows how long it would have taken for the American system to respond. And my parents are both well-educated, upstanding citizens, and had all the education required, whatever. So I'm lucky in that my parents were able to wait 6 years. Our life wasn't necessarily in danger or anything like that. I just feel like, what do people do whose lives are in danger? Or should they just get fucked? Should they die? Like, I don't understand. I think it's commendable to anyone who's willing to risk their life, to uproot everything, leave their family behind, everything, to try to find a fucking better life. And now a lot of them are already in the United States. So Sprouticus, right? Is that your name? I think said that these people are randomly coming in, and we don't know if they're going to go to their court dates or whatnot. So a Penn Law review showed that 83% of immigrants attended all of their court dates, and 95% attended them after just one reschedule. And the reason they couldn't make it was because of transportation and time off work. Those were the 2 leading causes that people weren't able to make their court dates. So it seems like it's a pretty good system. And I think that already currently there's 10 to 20 million undocumented people living in the United States. You said they're freely roaming the country, and I don't know what that means, but regardless, it would probably be good to have them under the tax system, have them documented, and all these things. They're already here.
Wait, did you just say they were undocumented?
Hold on, we're still opening statements.
Yeah.
Okay, he's
and then
addressing me.
okay,
Just-
and then also for like for seasonal workers, more perfect union. You said that they could like pass legislation to have like visas if it's required, but we've already discussed in the previous segment that passing legislation doesn't seem to be a very elastic thing that can happen very easily in the United States under the current climate. So it seems that like this is just an inevitability, and that the best thing to do is to come up with a pathway to citizenship and to get these people under the tax code. I don't think just because my parents were fortunate enough that they could wait for the visa that they're better people or more capable or anything like that than people who are undocumented.
Sparky.
Alrighty, so looking at what Sproutica said and all those previous, I do believe we do need to actually enforce the law, but what we need to do is we need to change things. And really what's going on, I've got a solution involved with this, but it encompasses a good bit of actually the next topic. Look, and it actually involves some of the previous topics. It's all about making the government smaller. And the way we do that is we actually bring home all of our troops. We take them from overseas. We put them on the southern border. We secure the southern border. We did the same on the northern border. We need a moratorium on immigration until we can actually sort everything out and fix America. I'm a nationalist overall. I want to fix America before I help anyone else. I'm not saying people shouldn't be able to come here, but what I will say is that the people who do want to come here need to bring value with them. So when they come, it needs to be a merit-based type immigration system. If you have a skill, we need the skill, come on in. If you have an education that we need, come on in. I have no problem with legal immigration. Illegal immigration, we need to yeet them out of the country. Not because they came in illegally, it's because they had complete and utter disregard for our laws. If they come in illegally, they should be kicked out and never allowed to return. Some people don't like that. Immigration is not a right. It never has been, it never will be. Unless, of course, y'all want to amend the Constitution. When it comes down to it, we made these laws and they've pretty much been nullified. And I have no problem with like jury nullification and things like that. However, it's been done through executive order. And that nullification has been voiding the actual votes and the will of the people, because we are a republic, a representative republic. Our lawmakers made these laws and they need to be enforced. If they are not enforced, then we should yeet the executive and put someone in that will. I'm just saying, when you swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, you need to actually back that up with action. And that's about all I got.
Brittany, if you would please.
Well, okay, so the next two that I don't have very strong opinions on. For me, I don't really care if we have all these immigrants here, but I do care about the adverse reaction to it that's happened, and that would be my only real motive to crack down a bit more on immigration. I think one thing that might help, because I know Trump would talk about the catch and release a lot, like maybe some kind of ankle bracelet or something where they are going to make sure to come back for their court date, or I don't know, but I think Elizabeth Warren had a idea where it was almost like a trade-off to have some kind of comprehensive immigration plan in exchange for healthcare. Something like that, I think a lot of people might get on board with, but that's kind of really just
Mr. Rob Noor.
Okay. So I apologize. I had to go to the restroom. I wasn't trying to leave while anyone was talking, so I'm sorry for that. I think the More Perfect Union said the best thing, the number one thing that we need to do, which is start punishing the employers that are intentionally hiring illegal immigrants, because that is the incentive of people coming. We'll talk about this a little more, but Dr. Heimdall, I have no animosity whatsoever to people that are leaving their country and doing whatever they can in order to make a better life for them and their family. I really don't. I would never report an illegal immigrant. However, we are a nation of laws and we cannot have open borders. And so it does need to be enforced, but that's with no animosity whatsoever to the people.
I never said open borders. Yeah.
No. I'm not saying
okay.
you did. I'm just saying
Okay.
I understand. Like I don't have personal animus to someone wanting to come into our country because it's a great country, but we have to enforce the borders. It's just the way it is. Look, conservatives aren't going to want to hear this, but it is not feasible to deport every illegal immigrant. It is not. It's just not. We can't do that. And so you have to be realistic. And part of what that means is before we do anything involving the naturalization process, we have to immediately secure our border, period, end of story. Because if we don't and we start to naturalize people while we have a porous border, you've just provided the incentive for every single person that wants to have a better life to come here and say, we want naturalized too. And where do we have this cutoff then? Oh, well, we just naturalized the people that came last week, so why not this week? So we have to say from this point forward, no one that comes here illegally will be naturalized, but once we secure the border and do all these other stuff, then we should have, I don't know if it should be a path to citizenship unless you do something that is uniquely beneficial to this country, like serve in the military for so long or do great works of community service or something like that. But the rest of the people should be documented guests. They don't get to vote and things like that, but they should be allowed to stay until they break laws, not parking tickets or speeding, but like serious laws, like violent crimes. Once they commit those, then they should be summarily deported. The only exception I would give for that is dreamers. Dreamers, through no fault of their own, are in this country, and we have to give them a pathway to citizenship. It is not a 4-year-old's fault when they were 4 that their parents brought them here, and you can't punish them for that. So, but again, we secure the border first before we do anything like that. Border security and walls and things like that are important, but not as important as punishing the employers that are providing incentive. And keep in mind, if you're on the right and you think like, oh, Republicans want to be hard on illegal immigration. No, they don't, because their corporate friends love the cheap labor. That's why they won't go after their corporate friends that are actually incentivizing the illegal immigration. So it's certainly occurring on both sides. We need to stop foreign interventionism, which is it's amazing to me to listen to so many people on the left. They say they make these two positions simultaneously. Well, one, look at how many refugees in foreign countries, the deplorable conditions, so we have to accept people. And second, I support the CIA and the FBI and all of their conflicts that they have going on around the world. We should stay in these countries like Syria and Afghanistan forever. Yay. Or I support disastrous war on drugs, the war on drugs and stuff that end up leading to these countries having despicable economic conditions. I don't think we should be giving foreign aid, but we should not be intentionally harming foreign countries, right? So we need to focus more on our own country. And instead of this, what you hear all the time from people on the left, which is, oh, well, Kamala says, we got to go to Guatemala and solve the root causes. How long do you think it's going to take to solve the problems of Guatemala when we can't even solve them in our own country? Right? So the best we could do, instead of working on solving their problem, stop contributing to their problem. How about that? And focus on the people in our country. And I think that you'll see a lot of those countries do better than if we start there. We need to end this mentality of, oh, we have to help the rest of the world first. The way we solve immigration is by helping Guatemala, or, you know, we have huge hearts for all of the people that want to come here. As long as there's one homeless veteran in this country, not one damn dollar should be going to other countries, period. There are significant issues with people in this country, and it is the role of our government to protect the people that are citizens of this country. Period. End of story. And I'm sick and tired. Most of this foreign aid that we send to other countries, very little of it actually gets into the hands of people in these countries. So we simultaneously have a government that has disastrous sanctions on places like Syria that's crippling the population of Syria. And then they say, oh, we have to send aid to Syria. But you're the one, our government's the one that's crippled them with the sanctions in the first place, made them be refugees, or our disastrous interventions and things like that. Also,
okay.
Just real quick, end chain migration. It should be merit based, and anyone that comes merit based should not be eligible to receive welfare and things like that. You could have open borders, or you could have a welfare system. You cannot have both. That's the end of my statement.
10-4. Mr. Dylan Burns, and then we're going to be getting into the open discussion.
Okay, so can I just be clear? Is this a general foreign policy discussion, or is this a immigration discussion? I just want to be clear.
I do think that specifically these two things, since they are both outside of the nation, directly correlate, because they definitely are part of the federal government's purview for their responsibility, which is why these two things are inherently tied together while they are not normally discussed in the same fucking realm of conversation, right? So that's why, like, there was plenty of, I wanted to make sure that people had time to be able to understand these two things would be, they do actually come together, right? And because they come together, how, with the frameworks of government that we currently have, might we start to find a solution to both of these problems, right?
Okay, so both. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is hire more immigration judges. We have a immense shortage of immigration judges. The current, if you were trying to apply for immigration to the United States from Mexico right now, the wait time is like 15 to 20 years. It is an absurd amount of time. If that right now, people who applied before 9/11 are still waiting to get into the United States. It is a very immense high five. Okay. It is an immense amount of time. Secondary, anybody applying for asylum should be given territory within the United States as we go enter asylum case, either in a facility or to stay with family. That is their human right under international law, and they should be given that point blank period. Anybody who doesn't, it's kind of a piece of shit, honestly. Gotta be clear. That's like defined international law, that they have right to that, and that's also American law that America follows. And if we're a nation of law, then we should follow that. If we care about immigration when it comes to a law and following law, then international law should also be respected, I would assume. Besides that, when it comes to nations who are destabilized, the best thing you can do to stop an immigration crisis is work with the international community to help stabilize a country. They're not going to stop coming. No matter what you do. You can put a wall up, they'll get a ladder. You put guys with guns, they'll go through the ocean. You put patrol boats out, they'll go through submarines, okay? You look at the cartels are very smart people. They'll get in planes, they'll stuff themselves in mattresses. People are going to get here whether you like it or not. And not to mention, the vast majority of undocumented immigrants or people who here against the law are from visa overstays anyway. So it's not like building a wall or doing anything like that is going to fix that. And if the issue of drugs comes up at any point, most drugs go through legal points of entry. And when it comes to like Syria and foreign interventionism, I believe that the United States should be active on the world stage. I've held this belief for the entirety of my career. Rob can, he can nod. He can be like, oh my gosh, Dylan believes America should be active on the world stage. Yes, I've always believed that. I've always been a proponent of that. You can be like, well, this is the left's hypocrisy. This is my opinion. I am not the left TM. I believe my own things. I am not going to represent everyone else. I represent my own beliefs. When it comes to the war in Syria and the refugees that were produced from it were not produced from sanctions. That is not a correct assertion. They were produced from a protest movement in 2013 that was fired upon by Bashar al-Assad. Bashar al-Assad then showed brutality through protesters, tortured children, and shot protesters. This led to much of his army defecting. They then went into conflict, and then the Free Syrian Army started the uprising. After that, the nation became more destabilized as the military moved in forces from northeastern Syria to the areas of Aleppo to try to combat that. ISIS took advantage of this opportunity to move in. That's when the FDF rose. That's some history. The sanctions that are being talked about now when it comes to the economy are very recent and did not cause the Syrian civil war. And when it comes to Operation Timber Sycamore, which I sure would come up if we somehow get into a topic of Syria, was not the primary cause of disruption. You could try to make the argument that it was one of the causes, but there was many international forces that were funneling arms, guns, and militias into Syria. So I would say to put the idea that, like, well, the whole refugee crisis wouldn't have happened if America stayed out of it. That is untrue. It would have continued, and I don't think it would have been any less intense than if we would have been. In fact, I would say when it comes to northeastern Syria and it comes to combating ISIS specifically, the refugee crisis would have been worse without our involvement. Due to Operation Inherent Resolve, it helped bring stability to northeastern part of the country, and Trump's withdrawal produced more refugees, 300,000 to be precise. So if you want to talk about worsening the refugee crisis, it was a lack of involvement during the later parts of the Trump administration that increased that in Syria. I don't know. I don't think Syria is the primary cause for immigration to the United States, so I didn't think it was going to come up. But there's some of my positions on this. Asylum is a human right. Yeah.
Outstanding. So this is what we're going to do now. Dr. Heimdall, if you would, sir, heads or tails?
Tails never fails. I learned that from Vivian Wolf.
It's actually heads,
Oh.
right?
Well,
Oh,
much for
You love
that.
me some head.
Damn, Bill.
so much for that, right? So with that said, we're gonna kick it up to the other corner first for MPU to lead it off. So MPU.
Yeah, lots of interesting comment here, right, Dylan? I'm gonna agree with you partially, which is to say that I think the United States has to be engaged on the foreign stage, right? That doesn't mean we need to intervene and we need to cause our will to be imposed upon somebody else. But I think the concept of diplomacy makes for good neighbors, it helps you understand what's going on, helps you be able to plan and react and prepare your defense or your diplomatic strategy. So I will give you that. I think that's totally fine. With respect to immigration issues, I'm going to agree with a couple of points that Rob made that go against what Dr. Heem said, which, you talk about the concept of people that are coming here and they're leaving their families and they're leaving everything behind. But the bottom line is, particularly with unaccompanied minors, when they're coming across the border, they're being paired up. In a lot of cases in the United States, they're being paired up with people who are here illegally anyway, because they have a point of contact. And this is a mechanism that's being done. So people are coming in, sneaking in, hiding. And then when a child comes across the border, then they are coming out of the shadows to say, I'm the sponsor for this kid. Okay. And then they come in there and they may or may not be a blood relative. It might be close family friend or something like that. Right. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff that's actually going on.
Can I ask you a question? Why does it have to be blood?
One second. I'll let you ask the question. And there's a difference. There is a difference what you do with people that have been here for decades, right? If you were an illegal here and you haven't committed any crimes, and it's been decades, there is no real way, right, that you can remove those people from the country. But you can also give them a form of legal status that doesn't give them a pathway to citizenship. You can give them permanent green card status and say, that's fine. You want to live here, you want to work, you want to do whatever. And then if you do something extraordinary, as Rob pointed out, join the military, do some sort of massive community service or whatever, then you can you can earn your way to the next level, but it's not an automatic thing. And I think most conservatives would say, okay, that's okay, because we identify who the people are, we give them a legal status, and we dissuade by having a cutoff, right? You dissuade other people from coming in. And I think, again, if you comport that or conform that to the concept of making it illegal, making it criminal penalties for hiring illegals, okay, then I think you can sort of begin to cut that spigot off and get control of the border. And then you have a lot of options become available to you as a nation to figure out how you want to modify your existing immigration framework so that you can continue to make your nation move forward.
Okay, so I've got
One last thing to Dylan. One last thing to Dylan. You said that a lot of people have asylum as a human right, but you know what? In America, the asylum laws say that you must seek asylum in the country of origin or in the first safe country if there's a danger to yourself. So that's the law in America.
Yeah, I understand that's the law in America, but I believe the process would be much easier, and we could give those people those human rights a lot more effectively if we're able to allow them entrance into the country. I think the law would be a lot more effective that manner. Definitely when 92% of people who apply for asylum, once they get to the border, end up going to their cases.
Yeah, that's true, but 90+% of the people who go to asylum hearing are rejected for cause.
Okay.
So letting them into the country now makes it a burden on the federal government to remove them.
Okay.
And that would be an expense they didn't have to occur if they simply followed the law as it exists today.
The problem is...
A quick point to Dylan or Dr. He. Go ahead, Dylan. I'm sorry.
Okay, after you get done, Dylan, I want to
a bunch of times. I'd like to respond at some point.
Dylan had a point.
I want Dylan to finish, and then we're going to kick it down to Sprout, and then we'll kick it over to Dr. Heemdout, okay? And then we're going to open it up.
So when we have these people and they're applying for asylum, particularly in the United States, a lot of times this is fleeing particularly gang violence. And even if we reject someone's asylum case, that does not necessarily say we do not believe that this person has no danger whatsoever. There's a lot of cases where we reject asylum cases. They go back to the country and they do get killed. This actually happens very frequently, definitely with cartel violence in Latin America. And a lot of the reasons why I think we have such a high rejection rate, and I do believe this to be the case, is because of our low amount of immigration judges and people who deal with asylum. We don't have enough staff to deal with the amount of applications. And so what happens is, same thing with immigration court, is judges will have a very short period of time to overlook the facts of a case, and if they don't find any immediate danger, they'll immediately reject them. And then those people will end up getting sent back, killed. And I believe that having them in the United States would at least give them time to get their affairs in order in a stable environment where people who can give them assistance and NGOs can more readily reach them to help them, even if they can't get asylum in the United States because our courts fail or they or just rejected period, then they can at least collect their bearings and go. And since definitely 92% show up the cases, it's not like they're just gonna start running into the streets and we're not gonna be able to find where these people are. And yes, it is expensive, but I believe the human lives are worth it.
Okay, so to address what I was addressing earlier with Dr. Heemdout, there's a difference between legal immigration and asylum claims, right? So with legal immigration, it's you apply for immigration and you're on a wait list, probably it goes to a lottery to see whether or not you get in or not. And that's just the way legal immigration works, because there's a lot of people that want to come to America. Believe it or not, a lot of people want to come to America.
I believe it.
So, I mean, and believe it or not, you may not be able to tell because of my skin tone, but I am also a third immigration. I'm a third generation immigrant.
Okay.
My grandparents immigrated from Italy to the United States. So, and to address something else that happened before I get onto the topic real quick, is that I tried to address what Dr. Heemdout was addressing me in his opening statement, and I was stopped by moderation. Dr. Heemdout then tried to address what Rob was saying about him during his opening statement, and he was not stopped by moderation. But how can we use the system that's in place to move us towards a situation where the government is actually protecting its constituents? I will stick to what I said, is that we should provide, we should start applying the laws that are in the books, right? So if someone's trying to reach out for asylum, first off, they need to go to the first country that will accept them, right? So they don't. It's not just a direct shot to America. But even if it is we're going to go to the first country to accept them in America is that, then you know what? Then we'll take a look at your case and we'll decide whether or not we believe that you need asylum in the United States or not. With that being said, the other part is legal immigration. No one needs to be jumping over here, claiming asylum, and moving that forward. To bring up, sorry, I forgot. It just has been a lot of time between the last time I was able to talk. So undocumented. So Dr. Heimdall also said something about undocumented.
You're doing a great
immigrants.
job of like not being able to speak again in the future. Stop. Right? The whole point of this whole fucking panel is for people to come to solutions, right? Instead of arguing debate bro fucking tactics. I made that explicitly clear at the fucking beginning of this thing, right? So as I'm listening around the room, I'm listening to each one of you very intently to what you're saying, how you're saying it, because I'm listening with the ear of fucking solutions.
Did I not
Every single fucking one of you.
Did I not just give a solution? Was my last sentence not a solution?
If you decide that in and amongst what you're saying is it like, and this goes for everyone, right? This idea that jabs and that, like, while humorous, right, to certain people, that is not what the PAC wants to see. The PAC wants to hear conversations based around solutions, right? That's the entire point of us putting together this show in this format. Solutions. Okay? So we're gonna reset the whole fucking thing here. Sprout, take it away, and then we're going over it, and I believe it was to Dr. Heimdall, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Sprout, take it away.
Okay, so my solution, I just stated my solution. My last several sentences were solutions. I think we should start applying laws on the book that are in the book. We don't need to be accepting people into the United States that aren't American citizens that have traveled through 8-9 countries to get here to apply for asylum. There's 8-9 countries in between us and them to where they could have applied for asylum. Other than that, we need to continue with what we have, legal immigration, before we start deciding to change the laws, because we can't even apply the laws the way they are right now.
Before we go to Dr. Heimdall, I want to make this thing like perfectly clear for everyone, right? The reason why I'm being so hard-nosed about this is earlier in the week, some of you may or may not know, but I lost one of the founders of my channel. Her name was Chocolate for Healing, right? She passed away over the weekend. One of the things that she wanted to see more than anything was a more solutions-based panel. So me sitting here and having the patience necessary to listen to everyone has specifically to do with my desire to try to do her right by what she wanted. If we can continue in that spirit, Dr. Heimdall.
Okay. First of all, rest in peace, Chocolate. Let's just send a RIP out. Okay. I'm not trying to like take jabs or anything, by the way. If I refer to exactly what you said, it's just because I'm trying to respond to your point. I hope nobody is like getting offended or anything if I refer to your points, okay? But having said that, okay. So Rob, you said that they need to punish people for hiring illegally. Is this not already and I could be just naive on this, but my understanding is that you need to hire workers that are that have like income tax papers and so on and so forth. So it's already illegal to hire illegal workers. It's just that it's hard to track because they don't have papers, because we don't collect taxes from them. So that would be the first thing. Second of all, Rob, you said that you'd be open to having a path to naturalization if they did something for the country, like for example work for the military. But I'm just confused as to why you specifically care about the military when like regular jobs are also contributing to society. If they're naturalized citizens who are working regular jobs, even if it's fast food, they're paying their taxes, they're responsible citizens. I don't see why you're holding working for the military as such a higher thing that like, oh, if they work for the military, then we'll give them naturalization.
Can I respond real quick? Take me 10 seconds.
Okay, sure.
Why is it when we criminally charge someone and sentence them to community service, do we not just sentence them to get a job and pay taxes? Because there's something more with community service than just benefiting yourself and paying taxes.
Wait, but the community service could be jobs, like you could have someone who's a garbage man, which is a paid job, and you can have someone pick up garbage for community service. Wait,
community service.
Community service doesn't include picking up trash and stuff. Something.
Right,
for
but not
job,
if you're
not for
getting
pay.
paid, you're not doing community
No,
service.
what I'm saying is the actual act of the job you're doing doesn't really matter. It's about getting paid for that job or being able to pay taxes to contribute to your society. That's why I don't see why you're drawing the distinction between the military and someone who just works a regular job and contributes to society. So that's my first thing. You already responded, so you can respond again.
Okay, so then maybe I
after.
can
Wait,
clarify
let me
it
just
for you.
finish. Yeah.
To clarify it for you,
Sure,
right?
yeah,
I think
sure.
that the specific distinction is between, say, like federal and then local, right?
Why?
I think because military is federal.
I know, but I'm
Right.
saying why? Why is one better than the other? Okay,
Well,
Because you're doing something for your country. You're
Well,
like
Hold on,
Very
no.
purview of the
Specifically,
federal
the act of participating in that specific government earn a thing, right? And that's where we're talking about voting, earning the right
Okay.
to do.
So
That's
does
what
that-
I'm hearing,
Okay,
and y'all
so-
take it away. But that's what I'm hearing.
Okay, so then would any government employee apply, Rob?
Employees are not community service.
Are we not all a member of a society that we work together?
I don't understand then. Like, should I then not be able to write off on taxes as doing community service because I have a job and it's a service to the community by me having a job? Therefore, no one ever pays taxes because we write off that we're all engaged in community service.
No, I'm saying that people should pay taxes because they're working.
It's something completely different. Like it's kind of a red herring. It's just absurd to think that military service and community service is the same thing as having a job.
Okay. I guess I just disagree on that point. Okay, and so then the next thing, you guys said that unaccompanied minors come here and then sorry, this was Perfect Union. He's not here right now. But anyways, he said that unaccompanied minors come here and end up with like some other person who's illegal who then claims that they're their sponsor. And then they're not blood relatives. I don't really understand why the blood relative part plays such a big role into it. Who cares? Like if you're being cared for by your aunt or something like this, or doesn't really matter. I don't see what the relevance of that is. And also the asylum rejection rates are really high, as we brought up, but the attendance rate of the court dates is also really high. So that tells you that the system seems to be working and that people will show up to their court dates. So we should extend this option for people to come and seek asylum, I guess. And then I think that's everything that I had written down for this round.
I'll go if since I was kind of addressed there.
It's open.
Yeah, real quick on this. So we've got two numbers from Dylan and Dr. Heem, but I'll assume that both are good faith numbers. Either it's 92% attend their hearings or 87%.
Can I clarify it? Can I clarify it? So it's 85. Yeah, 85% go to all the meetings, and 92% go to the meeting, but they need a reschedule.
Okay, so so the point I would make in this is, I wonder what the 8% are that aren't showing up. You think that the drug mules and the MS-13 members, you think they're showing up to the hearings?
I think
So
I know.
that
I think
might
some,
be a
wait,
reason-
can I interrupt? I think when you have such a high rejection rate, some people are going to be justifiably cautious to go to the hearing when they see that there's such a high rejection rate.
So
Maybe they can I just finish? Maybe they think that they don't have the necessary documentation required to show that their life is in danger, but their life really is in danger, so they don't want to take that
irrelevant.
risk.
It's irrelevant to my point. Do you think there are illegal immigrants that try to cross that are bad faith actors?
Do you think there are people who don't have the?
I'm just asking a question.
Okay, wait, I'm asking you as well.
You could ask me a counter question instead of answering my question.
Sure, I think there are some people
and I'll
who
answer your question.
Okay.
Yes, some people don't show up to the hearings because they're afraid they'll be deported and feel they don't. That's irrelevant to my point. My point is, if we have this current system, because the point I'm making is, if there are a large portion, over 5% of people that aren't showing up to these hearings, I'll bet almost every one of those bad faith actors aren't showing up to the hearing. Correct? Okay, so that seems
criminals
to be a massive
do bad
problem.
things. Yes.
Right. So when we have a world where you literally can't go through an airport without the TSA sniffing you like Joe Biden sniffing a 12-year-old girl, maybe because in the name of, terrorism, we have to have the Patriot Act, we have to take away everyone's rights because of terrorism. And then we literally have a border where we know people could just flock through, and the worst of them will just say, yeah, I'm not going to come to that hearing. See you later. That seems to be a massive problem.
Okay, so what's your suggestion, I guess? I haven't really
So
heard
the
your
solution,
suggestion.
so the point that I'm making is the argument of, oh, well, it's not really a problem because many of the people show up to the hearing is kind of not true, because the worst people aren't going to show up to the hearings. That's the point I'm making.
Okay, so again,
Secondly,
what should you do about it?
what I think that so again, what we should do is all the things that I advocated in my initial speech. If you'd like, I could give my initial speech again.
No,
I can talk
okay.
about what we should do.
Okay, it's
Okay.
okay.
So I gave the answer. I'm saying that your point seems to be, well, illegal immigration isn't as big of a problem as people are saying, because most of the illegal immigrants show up to their court hearings. And I'm saying one of the reasons we secure our border is to secure the security of our country from people that want to bring in illegal drugs, want to have gang violence, want to commit terrorism, etc. And so if we're going to have laws like the Patriot Act that take away our Fourth Amendment rights to fight terrorism, we should certainly secure the border, because we know that the terrorists that would come through in that way aren't going to attend these meetings.
Wouldn't the
That's
correct
point.
thing to do just be to repeal the Patriot Act, and wouldn't that
Do
make
both.
more sense?
Right. Great. Right. So
But-
the
but-
Patriot Act is
Wait,
something
but
that
I can answer
right.
your question
So we
from
should
earlier.
do
The
both.
reason why a lot don't show up is a lot are killed. They're applying for asylum, and so in a lot of instances, while they're applying for asylum, they are shot and killed in their home countries. That happens a lot, particularly in nations that are particularly in areas
No,
of
that's
gang.
different. That's
No,
a different
that
statistic.
hap-
Yeah,
no,
so
that
this is
that
real
happens.
quick.
People
Real
will
quick, real
apply.
quick. We're talking about
Wait,
people.
wait. Let me. People will apply for asylum, and in the process between applying for asylum and getting there, many are killed. They die because they are in. If you're in a situation that you need to apply for asylum, you're probably not in the safest like baby crib being nursed by mom, right? You're as fucked as Matt Gaetz was when he banged that little girl. The thing is, I don't understand how that is like a weird, like, not a tidbit that should be mentioned. That if applying for asylum, you're in an extremely unstable situation, which could help explain.
Excuse
That's
me.
8%.
If I could respond, everyone else had a long chance to talk. I would like to say something. First off, these numbers are two separate numbers. You're talking about people that apply for asylum that are still not in the United States and then try to come to their court hearings. That's different than the numbers Dr. Heendown's talking about, which is illegal immigrants that come to our country that are then released into the country and are asked to attend a court hearing.
Wait.
So no, none of those people are being killed in
wait.
their home countries.
That-
Those are two different numbers.
You're talking about asylum. Okay, when it talks
No.
about no, it's not. The 92% number has to do with asylum. Yes, it does.
That's not what. Okay, cool. Then I'm not talking about that number. I'm talking
Then-
about illegal immigrants that we release in this country, and the statistic Dr. Heendown's talking
that's a
about
different
is those that
statistic.
then. Right. Okay. Got it. So
Dr. Heendown,
Okay.
let me
Anyways-
clarify. Are you talking about asylum seekers, or are you talking about migrants?
I'm talking about people who are asylum seekers. Yeah.
Okay,
sorry.
yeah, because we had the same number, so I know we were talking about asylum seekers.
no,
Majority
it's
of
but
asylum
again.
seekers are
Again, so
actually
your
in the
implication is this. What you're saying is this. We have a bunch of people that are seeking asylum. They come to the border and they say, we'd like to seek asylum. The U.S. government says, okay, you can seek asylum, but you have to go back to your country. And then they never show up to their court hearing because they were killed in their home country. That's what you're saying, correct?
Sometimes it happens, but you cannot. That's not the only instances. A lot of times people can apply for asylum not at the border, but like sometimes
Okay,
they apply for.
th-
Wait. Like Trump
this
was a
is-
huge. Trump was a huge advocate for applying for asylum from their home country, so they never even go and they get killed while they're still there. This is like a significant thing that should be mentioned. This is a big reason why I am in favor of allowing asylum seekers into the United States.
Great. I like this interruption. I guess you two are talking about statistics that are just irrelevant to the point that I thought was being made, which is a point that is constantly made, which is illegal immigration isn't a problem because even those that we release into the United States, 87% or some number like that attend their hearings. Those
But
are the numbers.
you went
I've read
after
that it's in the
our
high
number,
80%.
which was about
Excuse
asylum
me, excuse
seekers.
me. Okay, so you're making a point that's irrelevant to the point because you're making that point.
You
responding
brought
to
it
those
up.
That are questioning. Excuse me. You're making that point in response to people that are talking about problems of illegal immigration and millions of illegal immigrants being in this country and us knowing the amount of number that are here. The reason that argument comes up, what does that argument have to do with anything? Cool, a bunch of people that see, but why would anyone be concerned? Like if you're living in Guatemala and you seek asylum and then you don't show up to your court hearing, who gives a shit? In the sense
That's
that
why I was confused when you questioned it.
Okay,
That's why
well,
you bring it up. Why'd you
so
question
to
the number?
bring up-
I
to
said
bring up
asylum
the point
seeker. I'm
seems
pretty
to-
sure he
right,
said
to
asylum
bring up
seeker
the
as
point
well.
seems to bring up the point
Okay.
seems
I was
Okay.
talking to more
separate
perfect
point.
union. We were
No, no, no,
discussing
no.
asylum seeker
No, I
policies.
sit here quietly the whole time and leave everyone say whatever they want, and then when
I'm about to start singing. I'm about to start singing. I'm about to start singing. Okay. I feel like we've beat the fuck out of that horse, right? That horse is a bloody fucking mess all over the field at this point, right? like it got ran over by a tractor, a fucking M1 Abrams tank came in, and Sparky dropped in some motherfuckers burnt all over this motherfucker, right? Right? That's where I, like,
Dude,
that
that's
was
smart.
painful. That was fucking painful, okay? So, that said, shift the gears, right? I hope we know what the actual topic is, right?
Mhm.
Okay, Sparky.
Okay,
I'm
so
not- I'll be back. I can let my dogs out. Thanks for knowing.
awesome. There was an interesting idea that was actually brought up at the very beginning. It was brought up by Johnny Scarlett. It's one that I don't fully agree with, but I'd like to know a little bit more. You mentioned things like hostels or halfway houses within communities. So my first question, of course, is where does the money for this? Is this going to be like a federal or state subsidized deal?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think that because it is largely a Southern issue, because many people who are coming over and being put into these isolating camps are at the Southern border, this is something wherein I think you could set it up in a lot of major cities like New Orleans or like San Antonio, Texas. So it would depend, I guess, on what those particular cities wanted to do about it. But my main issue was that if these people come to seek asylum, and I'm not talking about, migrants and people who have no reasonable reason to be here. If people come and they seek asylum and they are being housed rightfully until they have the ability to either come into the country or to be escorted out, then part of the issue is they are being kept in a very isolating center of U.S.-run camps. They're usually referred to as ICE camps. And I want protecting the constituents, which is part of the question. I want protecting constituents to be partially protecting the people that we are now responsible for as they are asylum seekers. So I don't know who would fund it exactly, but my idea is basically that we would have these local houses where people could come in and they would be partially hostels. So they would be partially paid for by people who were coming as normal travelers, quote unquote normal. People from other parts of the United States, people who are visiting the United States. These would be hostels in major cities, and one of the major draw of these hostels would be that these people are able to interact with asylum seekers and get to know what their stories are. The asylum seekers get to be treated as normal travelers. And I realize that part of the reason I wanted this picked apart is because there is a lot of danger in these people not being necessarily well vetted. And so my solution to that would be vet these people, let them stay in some of the more traditional ICE camps for a little while. And then once they are into the second or third stages of being accepted as asylum seekers, get them into something more like a hostel, more like a normal environment where they could maybe have a job or interact in their local cities.
Well, see, even with some of the vetting, I mean, one of the congressional office holders was actually Al-Shabaab terrorist down in Somalia. So the vetting process in America isn't always all that great. For those of you who don't know who I'm talking about, it's Ilhan Omar. She was voluntarily a member of Al-Shabaab. Well, yeah, she's a horrible person. Anyway, but the idea of military being a form of community service. Let me tell you a very quick, very short story. So down in Iraq, we had an interpreter that actually worked with the United States Army for about 3 years. We fought tooth and nail to get him asylum. While we're sitting there worried about people who are trying to get my B-dubs and PlayStation 4 or whatever, as a lot of these asylum seekers we've seen coming from the triangle countries down in South America, while we're crying about those poor people who are just trying to escape poverty, which, by the way, is just a human condition. It's not a reason for asylum. We actually have people serving the United States in foreign lands in wars that we should not have been in to begin with. We need to go to non-interventionalism.
How does
yes,
any
we
of this? I'm lost. Okay,
I'm getting there.
I'm lost too.
I'm
'cause
completely
Al-Shabaab-
fucking lost.
I was coming up. I was going to talk about the topic, but then people interrupted me, and then my turn was over. So I'll wait another 40 minutes to get back to me, and we can talk about the topic.
Well, okay. So I asked something
Just
specifically
everybody,
about what
look,
Johnny was
everybody, look,
talking about.
just, all of y'all are so hot and heated for debate. I want to hear solutions, right? I get that there are fucking numbers out there for different statistics, right? The whole point of me inviting y'all here specifically is because I know you. I've had cordial conversations with every fucking one of you. Right?
Well, with all
That's
due
what I
respect,
want
TTV,
is a
I
fucking...
actually opened up with solutions.
Yeah, I did as well as so
Oh
did
my
Johnny.
God.
So did Rob.
I don't understand what are
They let-
non-solutions.
I had solutions in mind
besides
too,
talking about
so-
ceding territory over
Okay,
to people because they
I
claimed
can
asylum.
I can see that this is exactly what I'm going to have to do here, children. Okay, so
I would like to say that I'm not.
What just happened?
we're going to go around the room because now everyone has been server muted. Okay, we're going to go around the room. I would like to hear what your solution is to this topic before we move on to the next one.
I just want to be clear to
Thank
everybody.
you for your patience.
Ilhan Omar was never part of Al-Shabaab. I'm frantically trying to find what he could have possibly misinterpreted as she was part of Al-Shabaab. And I can't. Like, I'm finding some, like, conspiracy theories online, but holy shit, I have no clue.
The diplomatic space, but we should stop basically trying to push our economic growth on other countries. We should make that more domestic instead of us, I don't know, forcing all of our companies to send all their work over for slave labor in pursuit of cheaper products. Maybe we actually, build up our own country. We need to close the borders. We need to have a moratorium on all immigration, at least for 5 years, so we can fix America.
Okay, Sparky. So we need to have some time to be able to put together a plan. That's kind of what I heard there. Fair enough? Okay. Now, Brittany, we haven't heard anything from you hardly. Solution, please.
Well, I mean, I think DACA, I think, is a really good solution in general. Like I said, I think the ankle bracelet would be good. I know you're giving me a hard time on that in chat. So I think it would be a good one. I don't think we need more judges. And yeah, I think getting healthcare for comprehensive immigration would be a good way to get it. So that's all really I got.
Thank you, hon. Thank you. Burns.
Okay, so I'm just gonna say more immigration judges. That's the first thing.
Okay.
The second thing is streamlining immigration processes, make it easier for people to come here. A big way to make it so people aren't motivated at all to come here illegally would be to make coming here a lot easier. If you make something nearly impossible to the point that it takes 20 to 25 years for you to immigrate to a country, most people are going to look at that and say, that's way too long. My kids that I want to give a better future are going to be in their 30s by the time I get to the United States. They won't have that chance at education that I'm trying to go there and contribute to be. So you got to streamline the process and hire more election judges. Also, I have no fucking clue where Ilhan Omar was a part of Al-Shabaab came from. I remember that Trump used to claim that she was like a supporter of Al-Qaeda with a lot of really racist-y fucking backwards misquotes because I know the Muslim woman in Congress, but that's bullshit. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. All the extra filler stuff at this point, right? Like it. Appreciate it. Dr. Heemdown. Give me a sec here. Dr. Heemdown. Hear me, Dr. Heemdown? Where did he go? Okay. Johnny Scarlett, if you would.
So the halfway house sort of solution is not a solution for overall immigration. It is a solution for keeping people out of isolating camps. The solutions further that I think would actually affect the immigration system in a positive way and help protect our constituents, including the constituents that we're responsible for, even though they're not technically American citizens, are to streamline educators' practices when dealing with integrating migrant students. That's always been a really big task. I also think that we ought to audit even government farming and labor entities, contractors, constructions, etc., even the people who are government contractors, these people ought to be audited to make sure that they are not hiring people with no or with fake identification. And then as far as I did have a question at the beginning, which was, we have a majority of people who are coming over here and overstaying visas.
I'm still blown away that he said that. There's just no reality where that's true. I'm blown away.
Immigration in the United States. And I sort of asked a question. I was like, I'm no expert, but what do we do about these people? What are y'all's opinions? Should they be able to stay because they're so well integrated, or should they be audited as well and kicked out en masse? I think that it was Rob or Aircraft said very well that we can't kick everybody out. A lot of these people are really well integrated into our economy and into even our legal systems. So that was my ending question. I have a few ideas to make it a little bit better, but as far as the majority of people who are here, what do y'all think? We should be auditing them en masse or integrating them?
Okay, so we probably won't get a chance to get that question answered. Maybe we can address that in the future.
Alrighty.
Dr. Heemdad, I see you're back in here now, buddy. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I missed literally the last 10 minutes of the conversation. I heard my name was brought up.
It's all right.
so,
It's all right.
yeah,
Your
we can just move on.
solution,
Sorry. Yeah.
solution to the current problem. That's really what I'm shooting for here.
Oh, okay. Solution for the current problem would probably be to end the drug war, CTV, ayo, and have a natural path to naturalization for people, for everyone, whether they're illegal or legal. I think it's a noble fucking thing to risk your life to strive for a better situation. I think it's extremely privileged to say that, oh, only people who are legal immigrants should be able to come here. Only people who had the luxury of safety in their country to wait all these years, 10 years or whatever, to get a green card should be able to come into this country. I don't know. I find that a little bit cringe. And yeah, that's my take on it.
Up north. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, this is literally people restating their opening statement. You can go back in the VOD and watch mine. Save us time.
10-4. The more perfect union. Take it away.
Yeah, man, I'm kind of like along the lines of Rob here, right? The solutions are that you have to first control your border so you can figure out what your real immigration needs are. So, you know, penalizing or punishing employers who hire illegal immigrants has to be key to that. You have to create a disincentive for people wanting to come across the border illegally. Then you can approach your immigration programs to figure out, okay, what kind of immigration do you need, and flow that immigration in such a way as that you can have proper assimilation within the country, so that these people have the people that do come in have the best chance of success. And finally, the people that are here illegally have been here illegally for decades. You can't just deport them. So they have to have some path to legal status. I disagree with Dr. Heemd that needs to be a path to citizenship. I think you get them a permanent status. And if they do something extraordinary beyond having a job and paying taxes, a la the military or some significant community service, then you can give them maybe a step up towards converting that status into a path to citizenship. Okay, so everybody could have that, but it would be attendant upon the individual who's benefiting from the program to show cause why they should be made a citizen.
And last, but certainly not least, Sprouticus.
I think I've made my position pretty clear. Laws in the books. I'll end it with that.
10-4. Wait me just a moment here. I'm removing the server mutes because ultimately what I want is conversation. I'm not even going to get into the third topic tonight. Not even going to do it. I do want to thank every single one of you for coming to the Hickory Dickory podcast. The entire point here was to be something completely separate and apart than what I have been seeing and what the Wolfpack has specifically been seeing happen. Twitch politics. Debate Bro has its place for entertainment and certainly those kinds of things, and that's why I wanted it to be something completely separate and apart from that, because that was the goal
May I make a suggestion? The two
Yes,
things you can
absolutely.
do-
Please do.
Okay,
Please
two
do.
things. Massively limit the amount of people on the panel. Everyone here has good points, but it becomes very difficult if you're going to have a lot of people, because what happens, like the first topic, Dylan had something to say right out of the gate. He has to wait 30 minutes. And then when he says it, the conversation's moved. So, and it's no one's fault. It's not the moderation's fault or the panel's. There's 9 people, right? So that's the first problem. And the second is, if we don't want disagreements and back and forth, just ask the question and have everyone give speeches, and don't ask for the interaction. Because I mean, at the end, all it was us restating our opening positions. I think it's important to get in to kind of the minutia of data and things like that. Certainly, you can steer it towards, well, we want this to be solution based, but if you can't really respond,
I think that's a fair point, right? So maybe, and I'll sit here through the week. I'll talk to the pack and see about maybe adjusting the format a little bit, but it certainly seemed that whenever it was more directed, that there was more solutions and bringing up problems in what other people were saying. And because the times were specific, you couldn't go into the classic debate bro ad hominem attack, right? So,
also, on a side note, Dr. Heem, before you leave, can you send me that site, the 87% number?
Yeah, for sure. I'll
Thanks.
I'll send
Put it in the Discord. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. And being here. The stream dropped 3 times, so the devil was definitely testing my patience. Definitely testing my patience. With that said, I'm going to be jumping out of here. Thank you for coming tonight and being a part of this. I know that you being here is simply just to support me in this idea, and for that is very, very much appreciated. And a special shout out to Chocolate for Healing. Honey, I tried my best. Well, thank you for being here, guys. Okay.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Big bless.
XTV.
See y'all later.